What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Frames Fantasy Football Kickoff Show. I am your host temporarily, Jorge Edwards, as the rest of the Fantasy and Frames crew who will be joining us today are still getting up because we are all enjoying that extra hour of sleep that we got this morning / last night. As we do every week, we're going to answer all of your start-sit questions. Excuse me. Go game by game. Talk about all the fantasy football relevant players on the offensive side of the ball, as well as defensive in terms of IDP. We'll answer some questions regarding DraftKings lineups. We may even throw a DraftKings lineup your way, give you some insights onto what to get information for that, as well as remind you to head over to fantasyandframes.com to check out all of our articles before kickoff today. But before we do all that, let's get to this. Yes, as Deadpool just said in that video intro, let's effing go. I'm censoring that, of course. But anyhow, like I said earlier, I'm Jorge Edwards, founder of Fantasy and Frames, and we are doing the Fantasy Football Kickoff Show for Week 9, 2024. Folks, we're like halfway there. This is a little crazy. This fantasy football season has gone by super fast, and we hope you've enjoyed watching us and listening to us and reading all of our content here at Fantasy and Frames, or watching all of our content over on our YouTube channel or on TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media platform you want to utilize to get quick information. That's the one you go check out. Obviously, following at Fantasy in Frames. Shortly, we'll have Nate Markham and Keith Fleming joining us to help round out the show, as well as maybe get a few other guests on. You just never know what's going to happen on the kickoff show. Although my bet, getting that extra hour of sleep is probably not many, but at least we'll get some here. And of course, if you have any questions, whether you're watching on X or if you're watching on X, head over to our YouTube channel at Fantasy and Frames. Drop your questions there in the chat. Whatever you want to talk about, whether it's saying good morning, who should I start and sit? What a lovely fantasy football helmet collection you have going on and title belts behind me. Compliment me, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to talk about. Just feel free to head over there and do so. But let's get into this. And I don't want to do this right now because the first game we're going to be talking about today is Dallas at Atlanta, and it wouldn't be right without Keith Fleming being on the show, being an Atlanta Falcons fan. He's due for a rant every year, folks, when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons. Like one of those rants you record and you hold over him in terms of blackmail for the rest of one's life. He hasn't had that yet. We all still remember back a couple of years ago when he gave that epic rant with Jalen Carter going, not to the Atlanta Falcons, but going to the Philadelphia Eagles. And that is forever etched in our minds here at Fantasy and Frames, and I'm sure yours for those who have been watching and following us for years and years. So let's just hold off on that, but let's wait for we get some more start and sit comments. We're going back to Week 9 of the fantasy football season. It's been pretty crazy. Speaking individually, this has probably been one of the most competitive years I could say for me in fantasy football, because everyone's records, at least that I'm in, the leagues I'm in, especially the industry leagues, we're all pretty much the same records. It's the points for and points against that are the tiebreakers here that really are differentiating, who's at the top, who's at the bottom. And I've never had that before. Normally it's been pretty clear and cut that you have your upper echelon teams with a better record, your middling teams, and then your, teams that you just know are completely out of it. Completely out of it, quote unquote. As they say, you can have a bad record still and still find a way to win your matchups. And that's actually what happened to my wife in our home league last year. She started off, I think, 0-6, and came back and not only knocked me out of the playoffs, but actually won the whole damn thing. So you never know. And of course, the trash talking commenced for at least a year. And let's face it, the trash talking is commencing this year. I take her on this week for the first time in our home league. We're both projected to score an equal amount of points. So, Yay for that. Vote for Jorge. Go, Jorge. Yay, Jorge. And I say that, but chances are the way the world and the universe works, it's going to be the misses that comes out on top. But let's just hope that that does not happen. But for you, I'm very curious as to what your thoughts are. And again, drop into the comments of the YouTube channel. Has your season been, kind of like what I was just describing, where you have a lot of similar records, but it's the tiebreakers that are really coming into play at this point of the season as we get closer and closer to the fantasy football playoffs? Or is it just, pretty cut and dry, you're dominating or you're in the middling of the pack or you're at the bottom? That's something I would love to know from everybody watching. But again, like I said, if you're watching on X or Facebook, head over to the YouTube channel and let's talk about anything you want to talk about until the guys get here. But eventually we will talk about some fantasy football. And like I said earlier in the show, we do cover offense and IDP fantasy football. We love IDP Fantasy Football here at Fantasy and Frames. We always compete in the Fantasy Pros Expert Consensus Ranking Competition. A few members here at Fantasy and Frames do it every single year. I know Nate Markham and myself, we do that for IDP. Won some awards here and there, humble brag, but not so humble because, we put in a lot of work to win said awards. But I digress. Let's just, screw it. Let's just get into it. And if Keith repeats himself, hold on. We got a comment here in the chat. Keith Fleming, you are saved here, my friend. Let's see who we got here. We got Money Symbol, Lim, Jim. Well, okay. Sorry if I butchered that, and I know I did. Albert, good morning. Good morning to you, sir. Going back to Little Jim. Hey, I traded Malik Neighbors and Russell Wilson for Trevor Lawrence and Dalton Schultz. Did I lose that trade? Yeah. Without knowing a lot of the impacts here, are we talking now for redraft? Or is this just for the season, or is this a dynasty? Because if this is a dynasty, yes, and quite frankly, for redraft, possibly. So if it's dynasty, definitely you're on the wrong side of that trade. Trevor Lawrence, we know that the Jacksonville Jaguars like to push the ball down the field, so you're going to get at least the passing statistics coming from him. Dalton Schultz, yes, there is the potential for uptick in targets because Stephon Diggs is out, because now Nico Collins is out. But I feel like that's a short Band-Aid once Nico Collins comes back and they really start emphasizing him and Tank Dell a lot more in the offense. We saw what happened on Thursday Night Football with Tank Dell really getting peppered with targets there for the Houston Texans. If there's anything I'm concerned about here, for Dalton Schultz, thank you very much for the question there, Little Jim. But let me know if it's dynasty or redraft, because that makes a huge difference in a more huge difference in this trade. Let's get let's talk about CJ Stroud. Without having all of his weapons around him, and that offensive line not doing so good in the middle, it's been tough going for him. You know what I mean? It makes you wonder. Everyone loved his rookie year. Obviously, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. And you have to ask yourself, are the people who had him in the top 5 of quarterbacks ranked preseason, are we starting to eat some crow here? Because what's something that, we all say is common for top 5 quarterbacks? It's the rushing upside. And the guy doesn't really rush a lot. And he's more of a, volume, big play passer, not to the extent of someone like a Jameis Winston. Yes, he has some wheels, but you mostly see him either, make a great pass or get tackled to the ground. Because again, that offensive line, especially the interior of the offensive line, is a little concerning. So for fantasy purposes, I may be fading CJ Stroud as we go on throughout the season. That doesn't mean his skill players won't still have success. But for him as a quarterback at the quarterback position, that might be a little bit dicey here. We have Summer here in the chat. Hey, Summer, what's going on? Good morning. Quick IDP defensive back lineup question. I love these. Got to choose 2 between Cam Curl, Taron Johnson, and Grant Delpit today. Tough decisions. I'm assuming this is just one of those leagues where it's like a dynasty, where it's a defensive lineman, linebacker, and defensive back league versus it broken down into defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, safety. We call those 3 and 5 position designation leagues for IDP. So immediately I'm going to Cam Curl. Him being in the box. I want to say, if I pull up his metrics real quickly here, what we look for in our safeties here is really, or defensive backs, is how much they're playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And so when I look at, his, box percentage, 21.6%, just behind Quentin Lake. And those two have been really good safeties. It's one of those things where you can kind of like play them off interchangeably. I will say that, last week was kind of telling because you saw Cameron Curl play more deep safety, more free safety, more in coverage than you saw Quentin Lake. Yet 2 weeks ago, it was the exact reverse. I still believe that Cameron Curl has fantasy value, has tackle upside. So he would be somebody that I would definitely start there. As far as the last two, again, I like looking at the tackle floors for these players. Grant Delpit, here's the thing with Grant Delpit. He plays in the box 37.9% of the time, or at least he did last week. Yet, when it comes to a week-by-week basis over the course of the season, he's not really producing the high tackle numbers that you kind of were thinking are, would be associated with somebody close to the line of scrimmage. So the opportunity is there, but the production, there's like a missing link here somewhere. That being the case, I still think you kind of have to roll with this. The Chargers is going to be a run-heavy team here this week against Cleveland. He's going to have to help stop the run. So I would go Cam Curl and Grant Delpit here, Summer. Thank you very much for the question. We got, is that a Minotaur I see, or is that Nate Markham in the studio right here waiting to jump on board? We'll find out. Let's go. Hey, what's going on, dude? Got some questions in the chat here. Joe is here. Welcome, Joe. Non-PPR, pick two. Tracy, Dowdle, Dobbins. It's Tracy and Dobbins for me. What are your thoughts here, Nate?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I trust it. I think Dowdle will jump back into a heavier workload just because, he was sick last week, but we saw Zeke and Dalvin Cook are washed. But yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay. We got two more questions, and then I will hand over the reins of the show to you, sir. IDP linebacker question. We got Jermaine Pratt, Kazir White. It is boggling my mind that on a team with Logan Wilson, that it has been Jermaine Pratt who's been at the top of the linebacker points per game scenario. He is up until last week, he was second in fantasy points per game. Now he dropped to 15th with 13.9 points per game over the past 3 weeks. Still the guy there. Yeah, it's Jermaine Pratt. You just stick with the guy who has the hot hand here. Summers back with here. He just says, thanks. Also need to choose 4, 1 LB, 3 flexes between Zach Braun, Bolton, Diabate, and Tyrell Dotson, Edrin Cooper, Levante David, Brian Burns. Appreciate it as always. No, we appreciate you, Summer. Mm-hmm. So let's go with the linebacking situation first here, Nate. If I had to pick one, and I know Diabate is in for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's out, and I believe he got placed on IR this week. Mm-hmm. Edrin Cooper has been doing some pretty special things here in Green Bay, although last week his snap percentages weren't as high as Isaiah McDuffie, which I thought was rather interesting. And Levante David, I believe, had an injury late in the week, so I don't know if he's actually been cleared to play yet. I guess we'll find out in a little bit. But I would go Cooper, and then 3 flexes, it would go Bond. The Ernest Jones trade makes me kind of fade Dotson a little bit. So I kind of think Cooper, Bolton, and Bond. What are your thoughts?
Well, Ernest Jones was a late injury report situation. He might not play. If that's the case, Dodson is back into the good graces because that was a concern that I had too. But it's still, man, it's so tough because it's like I don't trust Edrin Cooper's usage week in and week out. Green Bay's done that to us for years now. They've played the start the one linebacker and then they'll have a rotational second man up to an extent. We thought it was him, so let's go with surefire plays. So yeah, choose 4. So the first linebacker for I'm going to probably take Bond, Bolton, Dodson, and this one is tricky. Do you go with the rush upside, because Burns, I've been high on Burns all season, going through the season itself. Hasn't lived up exactly. But Cornelius Lucas is out. The line for Washington is, they played better at times. I'm going to say Burns there for my fourth. But
Here we go. I don't hate it. I do like the onset of what Azeez Ojulari has been doing since coming on in replacement of Kayvon Thibodeau since he's been injured. But yeah, I'm with you there with Brian Burns that's definitely a good option there. So thanks for the question, Summer. Summer, if you have more questions for IDP, I'm putting in the chat the link to our IDP Plays and Fades article that you can find over at fantasyandframes.com. Just give it a read if you have any more questions. If not, it doesn't answer your questions, come on back and we'll answer some more. Let's see. We got Blue Yays. I like it. Morning, boys. Pick 2. DJ Moore, Jaden Reed, Jacoby Myers, Keon Coleman. We'll get to that first part of the question first. Nate, who are you going with?
Oh, it's kind of similar situations with both Reed and Moores. I don't know who to. Any given week, it could be one or the other. I mean, DJ Moore is the more likely one in Chicago, but I worry about Caleb Williams as far as, was last week an outlier, or was it more the norm in terms of the receivers being touchdown supportive? I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Very good.
I'm going to go with Jaden Reed and DJ Moore. And then, Taysom Hill, we will talk about here shortly. He will have a more improved role, but so is Laporta. Without Jameson Williams over the last couple of weeks now, Laporta's really started to see his route participation, target, share increase. Last week, he was the tight end 8, and I think it was 16.8 points. Those points, he would have been tight end 2 or 3 in all but maybe 1 or 2 weeks. So I'm still going with Laporta.
All right, let's go here to another question. We got Shakir, we got JJ Green, we got Khalil Shakir, Cedric Tillman, or Calvin Ridley, PPR. Cooper, I think you were talking about off air, is dealing with a late in the week injury. And he is more of a game time position, referring to Amari Cooper. Would that be accurate? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, Amari Cooper on Friday sprung up on the injury list. And so, yeah, that being said, it's kind of like I would pay attention to that, because I like, obviously, last week was really positive for both Cedric Tillman and Calvin Ridley. But if there's no Amari Cooper, Shakir's just, in that tier just above both of those two. So I would go in the order that you probably have that listed right there.
Alrighty. Next one we got from Tyler Sperry. Tyler, welcome. Jaden Reed, Keon Coleman, Kate Otten, Ferguson for Dallas. Let me, for me to be Jaden Reed and Otten, but let me tell you about Keon Coleman. The past 3 weeks in PPR, he is the wide receiver 24 in points per game. So I find that one very interesting. 2, you look at, Colby Conway's article from the Fantasy Football Laboratory, which you can find on fantasyandframes.com. And he was talking that since the Amari Cooper trade, you've seen Coleman's yards per route run, which is an efficiency metric, which is great to see when it's increasing from back-to-back weeks. So, again, the snap percentage is low, but he's starting to get phased in there. But I think for me, it'd be Jaden Reed and Cade Otten. What about you, Nate? And then Keith Fleming soon. So let's get him on the channel when he's ready.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think that's it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to beat up on Keon Coleman too much just because he has been improving, but I'm not completely sold quite yet.
Roger. Actually, Nate, do you want to take over for these last questions before we get to Dallas and Atlanta?
Yeah, give me one second. I'm sorry, man. My trying to get this.
That's cool. I'll get to the I'll get to these next few, and then we'll pass the baton here. What's up, morning, Keith? How you doing today, man?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Well, what's going on is we have Dallas and Atlanta in the show sheet as the first game to cover, and I kept on stalling because I'm like, it wouldn't be right to cover this game without having you here to give us some Falcons takes here, because we know how passionate you are about the Atlanta Falcons. So you're welcome.
Yes, that's the right word to use. Is passionate.
Hey, yeah, exactly. KJ Frederick, what's up, guys? What's up, KJ? I don't have good flex options this week, so I have Javonte Williams, who I am very low on this week, Deontay Johnson, Taysom Hill, McMillan, if not injured. I can pick up someone off the waivers like Coker. Since you just joined us, I'll throw that question to you there, Keith. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, I really do like Taysom Hill this week. It feels like a Taysom Hill kind of week. I know, last week was his first action since he was injured in the first half versus my Atlanta Falcons. He scored 2 touchdowns in the first half of that game before exiting right before the half. Carolina is just awful versus the run. So like for DFS this week, he is in my tight end slot in a majority of my lineups. I just think he's going to at least score a touchdown. And the fact that the Saints are thin at running back, Carr's coming back from injury, and the fact that I think that game will be fairly competitive because both defenses are so bad that I think that there's a good chance he scores. I will say, though, I really do like Jalen Coker as well, and he is somebody that if you have a spot where you feel comfortable dropping somebody, I would absolutely pick him up, because we saw last week in the first game, without Deontay Johnson, even though he was traded after that game, he saw a season high in routes, targets, like just across the board the last 4 weeks. He's all of a sudden putting up, a decent stat line for a young wide receiver that would be like your wide receiver 3 or flex option, where he's had like 14 targets, caught 12 passes, 180 yards and a touchdown. And I just think when you're on the Panthers, you're down a lot. That means they're throwing a lot. And if you're one of the top pass catching options, which he definitely will be, I think it's going to be him and Xavier Legette the rest of the season. He's going to get a lot of opportunities, which I know that's not super appealing, but those points count just the same. And, I'm a big believer in volume, right? Are they getting a lot of targets and opportunities? I think Coker will get a ton of them down the stretch.
Yeah, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I'm right there, and especially considering New Orleans is going to be very deficient in the secondary this week. It gives Bryce and company an opportunity to actually be what's a nice way to say this? Better.
Competent.
Competent. I'm trying to be supportive of the situation, and I think that this is the scenario you need. You need a porous secondary so that maybe he can kind of build the confidence, and Coker would definitely be recipient number 1 of the increased volume and increased efficiency.
I got another question here from KJ. Elijah Moore or Chestnut, who would be the best flex play out of all of the players, full PPR? I will say with the Browns taking on the Chargers run cover 4 22.2% of the time. And Elijah Moore, in terms of fantasy points per routes run, actually is leading the team in that metric. So call me nuts, but I think I'd go Elijah Moore in this situation.
Did they rule out Pollard?
No, they haven't officially ruled out Pollard yet. It's I don't think it's positive. It doesn't seem like it's trending in that direction. But I mean that obviously changes the whole narrative. If Pollard plays, of course you don't play Chestnut and it's easier. But I mean Pollard didn't practice at all this week. The whole team has issues as a whole. So I mean it's wait till we get to that game. You'll hear it's a laundry list of names. So I'm going to go Elijah Moore as well, but I can understand if there's no other options in Indy, it's Chestnut. But the question is what is that going to translate to from an actual offensive production standpoint with that team with, Mason Rudolph and company, I guess is a nice way to put it.
Yeah. I'm kind of in agreement. I will say though that again, if Pollard is out, New England's run defense is arguably the worst in the NFL the last 5-6 weeks. So the upside play to me is Chestnut for sure if Pollard's out, because it would not shock me if, say, he had 50 to 100 yards and a touchdown. I think Moore is definitely the safer play, and more times than not, he's going to score more points, even if Chestnut is the featured back in that offense. The other thing I just want to say is I think people are a little bit misconstruing this Chargers-Browns game. I'm not sure that either of these defenses are that good. I know that the Chargers, from the pass metrics, look, just like this great defense. I think they're number one on DK. Their first 3 games were against Bo Nix in his first ever start, Jacoby Brissett, and then they played Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle. They've only played 7 games. That has a lot to do with why their metrics look so good versus the pass. And they played Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and Rashee Rice got knocked out in the first quarter. So I think Jameis and them are going to be able to move the ball more through the air versus the Chargers than most people do. And vice versa on the other side, especially now with the news of the Browns' best corner being out, their best cover linebacker being out. I think that there's a chance that game actually can be a sneaky shootout where both teams are able to move the ball quite a bit through the air.
Can versus will. That's the dilemma that, of course, we face is if they can, but is that, will the Chargers go into a more pass happy scheme because they have that opportunity? And that's the one thing that I struggle with week in and week out is when.
But they have been though, Nate, because if you look the first 4 games before the bye, they were throwing it 24 times per game. They've thrown it 35 since the bye. They have completely changed their offense since week 6. Most pass plays on first down, the LA Chargers. I think that there is definitely evidence showing that Herbert was injured. That offensive line was banged up. And when they got out of the bye, they felt healthy about both. And they have really changed to a more pass-happy offense. Herbert was only averaging 144 yards passing per game before the bye. In the 3 games since, 288. So I think the Chargers are going to fling it today. I love Herbert today. I love Ladd. You can convince me on any of those Charger pass-catching options this week.
Yeah, I was going to say for Cleveland, they run cover 1 man 37.5% of the time. And in terms of fantasy points per route run, Ladd is number 3 and most efficient there.
You know what his target rate is too versus man? 37% so far this season. So he may get a heavy workload today if the Browns play their normal defense.
Yep.
Let's
see here. I got comments. We got here. Gross one. Let's see. Gross one for you this week. Lost my flex spot in my lineup. What was it? Last flex spot in my lineup. David Njoku or Coker half PPR. No tight end premium. Would this be in a situation where it's upside Coker floor again Njoku, or do you think because of what you were just stating, Keith, as far as defenses being both defenses being bad for the Browns Chargers game, that you would go Njoku over Coker?
I think I'd have a hard time sitting Njoku just because of what he has done, not only in recent weeks since he's came back and played 70% of the snaps, but what we saw last year with Flacco. And again, I love Coker this week for DFS, or if you're in a spot where you just need to find somebody off the waivers that's there. I think Coker's available in most leagues, but I would have a hard time sitting Njoku, who, when he plays 70% of the snaps, he is targeted a ton. That's actually an area the Chargers have had issues with is tight ends already this season. So I don't know if I could sit Njoku even for somebody who I love like Coker. I agree with you. I think it's more probable that Coker could have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns with the way that the Saints defense has been as of late, which is just awful, which, that gives me a lot of joy as a Falcons fan, but I would have a hard time sitting Njoku.
I would too. Yeah, that's what I'd agree with Keith there.
We got a couple more questions before we get to Atlanta, Dallas. Chestnut or Roschon or Dearness Johnson in full PPR. I actually like Dearness Johnson here because I think Philly will jump out to that lead, and we've seen that Tank Bigsby is not exactly utilized too much in the passing game and playing catch up. Is that too
Hell,
crazy?
Might not matter. Tank Bigsby and ETN both. I mean, with the health factor playing into both, it wouldn't surprise me if Jacksonville leans on Dearness Johnson even more ahead or behind, just as a preservation case. That's a little bit of a gamble. I mean, I guess if
that would be my one concern is that they play at 4, right? Which would be you'd be kind of waiting because if they're both cleared,
yes.
I agree with Jorge, but if both ETN and Bigsby are cleared, then you might be in a situation where it could be, you're just kind of screwed. But I mean, again, to Nate's point, that may not be the case too, because they both could be limited or one could get knocked out. I do like Johnson though the most out of those 3, just in general, for upside.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Let's do one more ID. Let's do 2 more questions, and then we'll get into Dallas and Atlanta. Nate, you can take over there. Chris B, how about that? IDP question for the boys. Start your 2 defensive backs out of Kyle Hamilton, Taylor Rapp, Cam Curl. For me, it's Hamilton and Curl. Nate, what do you think?
Yep. Agreed. And I don't even know, no context. You don't need to know why. I love Kyle Hamilton still, despite the ups and downs. I'll always be there.
Yep. Let's see here. We got one more before we get to the game. For flex, DJ Moore or Marvin Harrison Jr. Pull up the notes here. I think I'll go Marv in this situation. He's number 12 in fantasy points per route run and versus cover 3. DJ Moore further down the list. So I'm going to go with the person who's been performing better in that situation.
I don't love either one of them. But if I had to, I would probably lean DJ Moore slightly, just because I think that the Bears have proven against bad pass defenses, they can move the ball, throw it. I think Arizona is one of the worst defenses in the NFL across the board. My biggest concern would obviously be, is this the DeAndre Swift, they just run it on Arizona game? But, Arizona's also been frisky. So I do think they're going to be able to score points. I just think that they need more out of DJ Moore and Caleb Williams if they're going to continue to win games. And they have seemed to kind of take advantage of these good matchups. You think of like Jacksonville and these teams where they're throwing a lot, even when they're up. So there may be more opportunities to where Joe was talking about. He thinks Arizona, the success against Chicago's defense, believe it or not, is running. You're going to have more success running the ball against them than throwing it. And I could see a heavy James Conner day potentially, but it's really close. I mean, I think Harrison's probably the safer play, and DJ Moore has, slightly more upside.
Yeah, I know.
Nate, you want to take it over for Dallas, Atlanta, or?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Anybody that has any questions still out there, obviously, we'll get to them. I promise. Maybe we'll answer them as we run down some of the games. We'll try to go a little quick through some of the games, and hopefully some of the answers that we've already given in the questions will fill in some of those gaps. But yeah, the first game, like I said, Jorge, Dallas at Atlanta. Atlanta 3-point home favorites, 52-point total. Should be some fireworks. Micah Parsons is out. Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs has 3 did not practices. They said that it's a small calf tear, but they will try to see if he can go. If he can go, obviously limited will be an understatement, but he's still, I think he's better on the field than being off the field, but we'll see how that calf injury really plays out. Obvious plays, we're starting Bijan, CD, London. I think Pitts in this tight end landscape is a pretty easy go-to. Keith, as far as Kirk Cousins go, we know he's the Tampa Bay Slayer. Which Cousins do you think we're going to get this week against Dallas? Like I said, the one who just destroys Tampa, or the other Kirk who's a little closer to the QB 17 overall, that low win QB1, middle range QB2, more likely against Dallas this week?
I think it's more likely he's in that, middle of the pack QB range. And the main reason I say that, I think that we could throw on Dallas if we want to. I just think that Atlanta has proven against bad run defenses, they're not afraid to really run the rock this season, especially using Algier more as well. Like, I think it's going to be one of those games where Bijan, who has really seen an increase the last 3 games. I mean, it's like I actually looked it up for the it was like 59% of his rushing yards have came in the last 3 games. It's 37% of his receiving yards. His rush attempts are up 3.6 rush attempts per game over the last 3 games compared to earlier this year. And I think they really lean on the rushing side. My only concern, and where I could see Cousins having, like a monster game, is our pass rush is so bad. And I think it was on PFF I read this. It is right now through 8 weeks the 4th worst pass rush in the terms of pressure and sacks this century. So we're going back 24 years, and this Falcons pass rush is that bad. I mean, if you look at like Dak versus Pittsburgh, he was able to move the ball consistently against Pittsburgh. And if I remember, that was a Pittsburgh with Watt was banged up. Like, they had a lot of injuries for their pass rushers. And in that sense, he was able to just kind of move it up and down the field. If it turns into a shootout, obviously I think Cousins' upside goes up even more. But I think Atlanta's plan, at least, is going to be, let's really run Bijan, let's run Algier. And then it's going to be dependent on, does Cousins end up getting those touchdowns, or to the backs, whether or not, he's kind of in that middle of the pack QB, or if he's, a top 10 QB this week.
Can I be the person who's all in on Kyle Pitts this week?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you look at, fantasy points per routes run versus cover 3, Kyle Pitts, tight end 1. And you look at that metric compared to the wide receiver metrics here in that same metric, fantasy points for drop back. It's Pitts who actually leads the receiving core there in efficiency. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pitts and Cousins have some chemistry today.
He's been great.
I'm not a defensive coordinator, but I wonder, and I'm really asking this to the more defensive coaching minds that I wish I, had direct access to as far as Dallas goes. But when you're missing Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs, potentially, do you still run the same heavy, cover 3 looks, or is that transition to something more acclimated with the talent they have? Because I think that's, and I'm not saying that to look at this, at the numbers like that and go, this plus this equals that, because I think that's fair, a very, very fair statement. I just don't know that. And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate. I'm just intrigued. And it's one of those areas that I want to tighten up on and try to pay attention to and see, like, do we have the time to go back and look and say, okay, well, here's game example. In week 2, they didn't have these 2 and they ran cover 3 13% of the time versus the other weeks where they had everybody and they ran it 64%. It's something worth.
No, you're right. And when you look at like the defensive coverage breakdowns here for Dallas, when they're not running cover 3, they're running man. And so with those players who are down, those coverage corners who are down for Dallas, it makes me wonder whether or not they're just going to stick with the zone coverage just to compensate for those injuries at defensive back.
Yeah, and I think that's should be what they would do. I would imagine. I wouldn't want to stick some other guys out there. All right, so as far as you touched on Algier, and with Algier getting more workload, is he in your, flex only deep leagues? Is he flex, even shallow leagues? Are we talking, hey, you think that it could be run heavy enough that if you were in a pinch with bye weeks, he could be your RB2?
Yeah, if I was in a pinch for bye weeks, it's one of those situations where if you don't have a great option, like say you've got a guy that is borderline, RB2, RB3 anyway, and they have a tough matchup, I would rather go with Algier, because we've just seen like the Saints, the Ravens, like some of these teams that are very good at running the ball, and the Falcons are also, especially over the last few weeks, elite at running the football. They're not afraid to just go with the game script, which is something different. And what I really appreciate about this coaching staff compared to when Arthur Smith was there was it seemed like there would be games where we could get 6 yards anytime we wanted to on the ground, and he would start throwing it. And it's like we saw in that Carolina game, like basically the second they saw Cousins was not looking like the Cousins we saw earlier this season, and both Algier and Bijan were cooking, we ran it. I think it was like 85% of the plays in the second half. And I just think that that is the safest way to win this game. Because again, I have concerns that if you give Dak time, like Dak, I know has looked bad, and so is the Cowboys passing offense. But again, you give any QB with his talent, the kind of time the Falcons are giving QBs, I think he's going to be able to pick you apart.
Yep. Agreed.
I will say, in terms of like secondary options for Dallas and Atlanta, whether it's Jalen Tolbert or Darnell Mooney, I wouldn't be surprised if Ray McLeod gets in on some of the action, because all three of the top wide receivers for Atlanta, he averages more points per game versus that kind of coverage than Mooney and even Drake London. So I that would be like I don't know if that speaks to like more of a very bold DFS play or a very, very deep roster you have there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets into it a little bit.
Yeah, the opposite side of the ball, though, we had a question earlier about Rico Dowdle. Yeah, his return after illness. I think it's going to be back to a 60%, workload is what he should do.
Didn't I say Zeke is like ruled out or something for disciplinary something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't know how I didn't see that. Maybe it was
I saw it literally first thing this morning, and I had not seen it before then. So I don't know if it broke late last night, but so I would think he has even more involvement because of that. Because they didn't really look like they gave a lot of opportunities to Dalvin Cook last week, but and also I just think that Atlanta's a good run defense, so it's more likely he is going to probably be, I think, a force in the passing game is where I'm looking at it, where he could do the most damage.
Absolutely. No, that's good note. I did not see it, but then again, it was a clock issue this morning as far as which is crazy. We set the clocks back, and you think it's 2024, and I would know that my phone is going to automatically do it, but I'll be proactive with other devices. But, we're here. And before we go any further, I want to answer a question we have in the chat. Jorge, it is.
Yep. 14-man league. So this is an example of a Ray McLeod league. What does it say? He's 3-5. My wide receivers are Zay, Chris Olave. I'm assuming Devontae Smith. Mm-hmm. Should I look to upgrade ASAP, or can I sit on these guys rest of season? Thanks.
So Olave, I think rest of season is great. I think that's he's a person that I've been looking to buy if given the opportunity the last week or two.
No, Rashid. It's like all the concerns we had about him earlier this year are gone. And I mean, even we saw a Rattler last week. Worst case scenario, if Carr gets hurt again, he can still get off, even with Rattler. So I agree.
I'm good with Devonta Smith rest of season because the Goddard health seems to be wavering as we continue on. And I think last week, 2 weeks ago was an outlier. I get it. The very limited targets. And I know that they can lean on the run and there's a lot of mouths to feed, but to upgrade Smith in a 14-man league is challenging. It's what's your thoughts on Zay? Is he affected by Deontay Johnson as much as some people are making it out to believe? And would that be and that's what I think. I don't think so either, but
I think it's those secondary options that are hurt by Deontay Johnson. It's the Isaiah Likely's, the Mark Andrews, the Justice Hills. Like, I think it makes it less likely that those guys, Rashad Bateman, have big games because, I was a little just confused, to be honest, when I saw the move, because I'm going, really, Ravens? Like, this is what you've taken from your first, 8 games is we need yet another pass catching weapon and not somebody who can stop quarterbacks for throwing for 500
exactly.
yards and 6 touchdowns each week. But I will say in that game, I saw a play versus Cleveland where he threw the bomb to a wide open Rashad Bateman that would have basically sealed the game, and it went all kind of Bateman's helmet chest. And that kind of makes sense, right? That they want that other secure hands. But I don't think they're going to be asking a lot from Deontay Johnson. And the other thing that just concerns me about, let's see how Deontay does there is the Panthers let him go for nothing.
I know.
The Steelers let him go for nothing. There's a theme here, people, and he's a very talented wide receiver. So then my number one thought process would be, what's going on behind the scenes that these teams, despite like good production and good results on the field, are just like, just take this guy off our hands. You can have him for literally nothing. I don't think it's going to affect Zay Flowers. He is their clear number one. I still think it's Lamar, obviously Henry and Flowers, and then it's everybody else that I could see from Deontay Johnson, like taking a small hit in their week-to-week value or their monster games.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I worried about the same thing with Deontay. It just makes you scratch your head. And I wondered, and I heard a comment on a show or in passing, and I want to give credit, but I can't remember when and how. And it did it. It lended itself to that. Is Deontay better for fantasy that we see than he is on a football field with teammates and overall, and those things, the cohesiveness of a team is much more important than our production for fantasy. And so that
we see it with coaches, right, all the time, where like a new coach will come in, kind of change the culture, right, and all of a sudden a team that was pretty bad is like winning games.
Right.
I think that there's definitely, and again, we have that brain where sometimes we have to remember that we are always looking at things from a fantasy lens, which is our job. So, I mean, that's good, right? But there's a whole nother avenue out there. It was like the Amari Cooper deal, right? Where we talked about, I think I remember me and you the Sunday of that like great for the Bills. I don't know if it's great for Amari Cooper, for fantasy necessarily value, because I think he just makes the Bills a lot better, but they're not going to start targeting him 10, 12 times a game.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, it was an upgrade over any Deshaun Watson situation.
Right. Yeah.
But in hindsight now, if the Achilles I'm going to say, if only the Achilles had ruptured earlier, and I don't mean that other than the people I think most everybody would agree. I still would never wish on anybody, but if there's a person, many would say that's.
Oh, he would have gone off with Winston. For sure.
Yeah. I've been just waiting all year, and it didn't work out, but it's all right. We talked about Baltimore. Let's go to Baltimore. It's Denver at the Ravens. Ravens 9.5-point favorites, 46.5 point return. Baltimore, you mentioned, why don't they go out and do something to address their weak secondary? Well, maybe they didn't have to as much because Marlon Humphrey looks poised to return, which will be huge.
Yep.
They still need pieces. Marlon Humphrey's absence is not the reason why they've gotten toasted by every passing offense out there. It's more than just him, but it is definitely helpful. Having Lamar Jackson in your lineup, Derrick Henry's helpful. What's intriguing is this spot right here. Bo Nix, Baltimore secondary. We know how bad they are. I get it. Getting Marlon Humphrey is going to be helpful, but Bo Nix has been nothing short of spectacular. He has good rushing upside to support it, but do you have the intestinal fortitude, the guts necessarily to hit the button and put Bo Nix in over, I'm trying to think of a tricky example that it escapes. Well, like over Tua. Would you put him start Bo Nix over Tua against Buffalo?
Yes. And again, I have somebody that's really changed my viewpoint in the last 2 years of, I want rushing upside. These QBs, unless they have just a unbelievable matchup, I'm always going to take, if you give me two guys that are even close in rankings and points per game and all that stuff, I'm always going to take the guy that could get 50 yards and a touchdown, which again, last week, he did no rushing, had a monster game, but he still got that rushing touchdown, which to me, again, just shows even more his value, right? This is a guy that had 100 yards the previous 2 weeks. And even though he only had 4 yards, he still got the touchdown. I want that rushing upside. I like Bo Nix a lot this week. The only concern I have about Bo Nix is we saw the Ravens after their back-to-back losses earlier this season just say, okay, we're just going to smash everybody in the mouth with Derrick Henry and run it down your throat. And that would be my one concern is that what they're going to try to do to Denver? Take the ball out of, the Broncos' hands, not let their offense get a rhythm. It's 7-8 minutes in between possessions for Nix. And, that could be a tough situation. But again, if you think the Ravens are going to score points, which I do, I still think he could, in garbage time with his legs and his arm, put up 15, 20 points, which, that's going to make him be a top 15 QB for sure, potentially a top 10, depending on the week.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to sit and to ignore the production. And I talked about it, and yet I get the same reaction from people, like in non-fantasy circles talking with you guys, but just to the average home league. And I mentioned Bo Nix as an upside pick, and you get the same look of, I am not starting Bo Nix. And I'm like, but take the name out. Would you start?
This is Jalen Hurts all over again. Nate.
Yeah. Would you start 42? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people believe that Bo Nix is as good as a rusher as those other guys, but the proof's in the pudding that he has the mindset and the wherewithal. He's an experienced quarterback. He probably has more passing attempts than I mean, he definitely has more than any other rookie. I mean, that's. But
look at the best two QBs this year, in my opinion, both forget fantasy, but just like in their play in the NFL right off the bat. They're the two that are the oldest two QBs that were drafted in Daniels and Nix, and the two that had the most experience and played under the most systems, which is a big deal to me because both of them had already had experience of playing for one program under a certain system, and then they went to a completely different other one, had to learn that success. And that's what the NFL is, whether
100%.
you stay put or move, is, things are constantly evolving, right, with offensive coordinators, head coaches, etc. And I think there's so much to that. What you're saying is that he's basically a veteran already, even though he's technically got that, R next to his name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's, I think it's interesting to watch. And I know I'll be in one of those situations in a league or two where I have to make that decision, and I need to make sure I trust the process, as they keep, as we always say. And I think he's the process, but,
he's much better than I thought he was. I was completely wrong. I thought he was going to be awful at this level. And the first few weeks, I was told you when his yards per attempt were 2.5. It's over 7 yards per attempt now for I think the last 5 weeks. So you can't even say anymore that he's just checking it down. He's actually throwing the ball down the field and really doing some good stuff. This
is beyond making chicken salad out of chicken shit. This is making filet mignon out of chicken shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's been impressive because, I mean, look at the ancillary pieces we'll talk about. Javonte Williams, which Javonte Williams we're getting, I mean, here last week was a smash play against Carolina, and he comes in and disappoints. So this is a tough matchup. Do we expect him to come in and destroy Baltimore? I mean, I don't necessarily. I'm down on Javonte. Are you up on Javonte this year?
No, hell no. No, okay. I mean, I think that's another reason why I kind of like Bo Nix this week, is I think that anything they get this week is going to be through the air and probably through Bo Nix using his legs. So it's almost like what ended up happening last week versus Carolina, where just whatever they get, it's Bo Nix. And that's, a good place to be, because Baltimore is still arguably the best run defense in the NFL, at least from yards per carry and a bunch of those metrics.
Mm-hmm. Is your faith restored in Mark Andrews? Last week we saw his route participation increase. Was definitely more involved in that game. You might have never lost faith necessarily.
No, I did. Oh no, I absolutely. I was the one saying he's dead. He's done.
Yeah,
the better tight ends, Isaiah Likely. I was screaming that all summer.
I know.
And I still don't trust him. There's other tight ends that I would rather have, especially because, again, that Deontay Johnson thing, I think Andrews is another guy that is potentially hurt just by having him there, because we've seen, there's not a lot there outside of Flowers, Henry, and Lamar each week, at least for fantasy purposes. It's almost like a, I don't know, a tilt-a-whirl, and it's wherever it stops, that's who's going to get it. But I definitely am encouraged by his routes, and he's been playing good. He's actually looked more explosive. I don't know if they weren't telling us and he was banged up earlier in the year, because he looked really slow early in the year, and now he kind of looks like the guy that, we remember.
And I like him this week, not as just a standalone, hey, I like him because of what we've seen lately. It's also because I think Pat Surtain's going to have Zay locked down, at least or to an extent. I think that's going to lean to a lot of Lamar looking to Andrew's directions. Let's look at the direction of a couple questions here so that I don't want to go too far. Number one, good morning, Charlene. She wants to know, do we think that Jalen McMillan is going to play? Would you pick up Josh Palmer just in case? Or would you play Pop Douglas, Elijah Moore instead? So number one, do we think Jalen McMillan is going to play?
I mean, I don't really live in the world of like, I don't want to, I'm not a doctor or anything. So Charlene, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. I will say though, that I would probably rather have your other options in general, because I like Pop Douglas. Now it looks like Drake may play. He's through concussion protocol. If he plays, I think that's a big win for Pop Douglas. Again, Jorge was talking about Elijah Moore's stats versus the defense that the Chargers run. And I just, again, have to keep pointing out the Chargers' first 3 games were against Bo Nix's first ever start, Jacoby Brissett, Skylar Thompson, Tim Ball. That skews your defensive numbers versus the pass, and that's 3 of your 7 opponents. And I do like Josh Palmer as well, because Cleveland has been giving up a ton of big plays, but it depends on who you're talking about dropping for Palmer to go pick him up. But I just I wouldn't risk McMillan. I hate having a person that is questionable at best, that is not, going to basically put you in a do or die situation where if they don't play, you're kind of screwed because of, the later start.
Yep, I'm right there. And a late week hamstring is probably the worst for the upside of a person playing. If it was earlier in the week, we would have more signs, but a reoccurring injury from dating back to high school, according to what people are saying.
Ooh,
yeah, and then, well, I don't dating back to high school, but it's dating back years. He's had some history of hamstring issues, but, and then it was week 4 and week 5. He had the same type of
that's right. It was that
scenario. So yeah, I'm right there with that. And then here's this half point PPR. Choose one. So Ramondre, Khalil, Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy. Man, I keep going back and forth on Ramondre this week, just because on one hand, I think that the return of Drake May is helpful for the offense as a whole. I think that their offense will be better. But Tennessee's run defense has always given people struggles.
It's actually the opposite, believe it or not, for Stevenson. If you look, all of his best games have come in games that Jacoby Brissett played a majority of the snaps. His games with Drake May have, like week 1 and 2, Jacoby Brissett, he went off. Last week where Drake May goes out early, again, he goes off. So just on that alone, I would probably lean Khalil Shakir. You look, Josh Allen, I know that they looked awful versus, Miami, at least the passing game, I should say that. They boat rust Miami in the first game, but historically, Josh Allen has been unbelievable versus Miami and the McDaniel offense. Like I went back and looked, he scored 27 points or more and thrown multiple passing touchdowns in the other 4 starts he had made the previous 2 seasons. Before this week, I think if Tua stays in, obviously that game stays more competitive, meaning they're having to throw more. And I actually think Khalil Shakir has been benefited even more than Keon Coleman by having both him and Cooper on the field, because he's kind of their target guy, right? Like the guy that does get the consistent passes when he needs 5-6 yards. And Shakir's talented enough to where I think he has a good floor and a potential ceiling. I don't want anything to do with this Tennessee New England game, like, to be honest.
Really don't.
Like I just don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, and I like, I like Xavier Worthy as far as the opportunity if he could do something more with it. I mean, the targets were up last week. They were at the level where I would want it to have a start-worthy wide receiver, especially with his upside.
Yeah, big play capability.
Yeah,
sure.
man, and I'm not thinking that I'm starting DeAndre Hopkins this week entirely yet, or with full confidence. I still think we saw him integrated into big 3rd down roles and design plays. I think the same thing is going to happen. They're going to expand the playbook, but it's not going to expand into the thing. So I think I might go Worthy and Shakir myself and look at that. There's a IDP question here. I'll just take the reins for it for you. Is hey, Will wants to know between Azeez Al-Jalari.
Why are the names so hard on defense all the time? Like, you don't ever get names like this on offense.
Well, Azeez Al-Jalari is a good one, so I've said it enough times.
I couldn't say it if I had to.
I know. And then here's an easier one, Christian Ellis. So Ellis, here's the tricky thing about this, Keith, and I'll fill you, is he gained defensive line eligibility, and he plays more of a linebacker role.
It's a good thing, right? Tackles and stuff.
Great thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's a cheat code. It's when Taysom Hill was starting at quarterback and he had tight end eligibility. You know, you can plug him into a weaker spot like DL and try to get the upside. So I'm leaning on Ellis there. And then good morning to you, Ryan. He wants to know Jared Goff in his first non-dome game. Ooh, scary. Or Matthew Stafford. Not sure how healthy Puka will be. Puka is trending towards playing, which is good. DK's out, so Seahawks may run the clock, which is true. Goff can be shaky on the road, which is true. And has running backs that can score. Also true. All true statements.
Yeah, very smart stuff by Ryan there, because this is basically what I was about to, go through and trying to answer this question for him.
He's really helpful. Can everybody lend questions that basically give
Ryan.
a good overview of how we're going to answer it? We can just go, yeah. Now we just have to, he's laid it out, and it's like all these lean where it's a 50-50 split. Now you have to flip the coin and make the decision, Keith.
I think that I do lean Stafford. I know Goff has been so good this year that maybe we should stop, saying, well, he is though. Like, just the historical data shows he's a totally different QB when he's outdoors to when he's in. And it's a tale as old as time. It's like the easiest way to beat the Green Bay Packers is to just run it down their throat, especially when you look, Detroit's pass rush has not been the same without Hutchinson. Unfortunately, that's just what happens when you lose a guy like that. And to me, that means that if I was Detroit and I'm going on the road with the chance to really take a hold of the division, and Green Bay sometimes struggles with running backs, it would be a lot of Gibbs and Montgomery, obviously. And then to where with Stafford, you just look like, the problem with Stafford is once it gets inside the 10, Kyron Williams is getting a touchdown. Like, that's pretty much the way it's been this entire season. But in the two games that Kupp and Puka have just played a majority, and by majority, I mean almost a half in the first game and the full game last week, he scored over 17 points in both of those. And I just think he's a safer play in Seattle, which I know sounds crazy because Seattle used to be the worst place on the planet to play. I think COVID ruined all that, and the road's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal for like Goff to be indoor or out. Kirk Cousins is another guy, same deal. Like, if he's outdoors, I don't want anything to do with him. Indoors, I'll always consider him.
Yeah, between the two,
that's if Puka plays. Now, obviously, if something comes out that Puka's not playing, then I would go with Goff and take a chance.
I'm right there with you in that same regard. If Puka plays, then just hedge a little bit towards Stafford. But otherwise, I don't think it's a bad option, which is always a nice thing. It's not nasty, Ryan.
Goff's been incredible lately. So, you know what I mean? In some ways, people would probably argue it's crazy to sit him. This is a big game. And sometimes big games like this, division rival, they're not as high scoring as other, because these guys see each other every year and they know each other. They know what they're going to do, et cetera.
About Sam Laporta or Jake Ferguson?
For me, this is easy. This is the Laporta week. I was the one all summer saying Laporta is extremely overvalued, and this is insane that he's going where he's going in drafts. Not because of the player, just because of all the miles to feed in Detroit. We saw with Jameson out last week, even in a blowout, his most targets of the season. I think it was his second highest receiving yardage total, his highest fantasy point total. And then, oh, by the way, Jameson is out again this week. And this is an even better matchup because Green Bay, you look the first 4 weeks, they played a nobody list of tight ends.
Right.
And they're still 24th because like Trey McBride went off against him. Kobe Parkinson saw like 14 targets when the Rams played him earlier this year. He had 7 catches for 50 yards. Like I think that in the passing game, like Laporta is the easiest way for them to get that going. And I do think Detroit's going to run a lot and then play action to like Laporta, St. Brown, etc.
Yeah. All right. Adunze, Keenan Allen. I'm still going to lean Keenan Allen until proven that Adunze is going to eat up a heavier workload. Cole Kmet. Good morning, by the way, to you as well. Cole Kmet, Jalen Coker, Tank Bigsby. Of those 3, man, it's like, again, we don't know about Jacksonville's situation. If both Tank and ETN are playing, I think that it's.
We assume it's like a PPR league, I guess.
I'm assuming this is a PPR and this is a flex option.
I would go Coker. I'm all in on him this week. And again, I could be wrong. But I like what I saw last week. The Saints secondary is awful. And what I like the most about this week is it's not normal that with the way Bryce Young's played that it's like, oh, I'm excited that Bryce Young's playing again this week when I'm so high on said receiver. But it's because he did all that damage last week having his best game with said quarterback. So I think that it's even more likely that he again sees that kind of target volume that he did last week, potentially even more. And again, like I cannot state enough how bad the Saints defense has been the last 4 or 5 weeks. Like I know they've dealt with some injuries, but I don't know what the hell is going on.
And that's the only thing that has me a little bit concerned with that game too, is why not just run down New Orleans throat the whole time, or maybe even, but that leads to, and we'll get to that game here shortly. But of these 3 options, knowing that I don't know what Tank Bigsby's situation is going to be, I'm going to make sure that I'm playing it safe. And I think I may go with Coker as well. And maybe this could, bite us in the ass if Bigsby plays and Kmet reverts back to.
Let's be honest, though. Do we really think the Eagles are not going to just stomp the Jaguars? Because I do. Yeah. I think, like, at home, they're going to. And unfortunately for Bigsby, regardless if he's playing or not, we've seen he doesn't get the pass catching, like third down. You're trying to catch up, snaps, which that sucks. Because I think he could be good at them, but for whatever reason, they don't trust him in those situations.
Isn't this Doug Peterson's revenge game to just
take it
to the Eagles?
I did not think about that.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
No Darius Slay. This is going to be Jacksonville. I don't believe that. I just said that because it's fun, but I don't really believe that. I don't trust Jacksonville as much. I would like to because, I look around me and I see, unfortunately, little square pieces of cardboard with Trevor Lawrence's face on it, and I think,
I got tons of
the value. Let's go, buddy. Come on. It is what it is. But good morning, Kyle. Full PPR, Jordan Love or Kirk Cousins? Let's start there. Jordan Love would normally be the easy answer, but does the groin injury create doubt enough for you to lean Cousins against Dallas?
I just don't think I can sit Jordan Love until he has a bad game.
Fair enough. How about
right? Because I mean, he's like, even if he has 160 yards, he throws 3 touchdowns every week. It seems like.
I know, and I mean, the groin injury has me a little concerned, but he just, I really fully trust him in that offense. How about Ferguson or Trey McBride?
Oh, I can't sit McBride any week, but especially I think this is the easiest place outside of running to attack Chicago's in the passing game would be with the tight end.
Agreed. No Jaquan Brisker, and the corners in Chicago were so dangerous. They're going to have to keep it between James Conner, Trey McBride, Romeo Doubs, Jalen McMillan.
So this is where the Packers offense is so frustrating for me because it really should be Doubs. He is the one that has had the most success versus man this year. But also I do kind of wonder, like Jaden Reed last year was really good versus man with the metrics. This year, he has done literally nothing. Like he's been so good versus zone, nothing versus man. I think that changes this week because, again, with the growing, maybe they're trying to get more underneath. But I would lean probably Doubs over McMillan because I just like if he couldn't get it going last week versus the Falcons with their lack of pass rush, right? Like I don't know how much they're going to. I think they're going to be doing a lot of what they did last week, a lot of throwing to running backs, tight ends, and try to run the ball is what Tampa wants to do until they get Mike Evans back.
But man, that's tricky. Is that you have to wait till Monday night to determine if Jalen McMillan's going to be playing, and it's like I am just even, I mean, I'm gonna go with just the guaranteed Dobbs. Even limited production is better than no production. And then how about a defense question? The Cincinnati Bengals or the Los Angeles Chargers?
Oh, for me, it's the Bengals for sure. I know, again, the Chargers, they look great, but let's just, again, pump the brakes a little bit. I'm actually very curious to see kind of who the Chargers are this week, because I think Cleveland, even without their best corner and one of their best linebackers, is a much better team with Jameis because they can score points. And they're going to really test this Chargers, secondary, which, again, first 3 games, Bo Nix's first ever start, Jacoby Brissett, Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, like that helps your metrics, because if you look across the board, they look great. And then again, the Rashee Rice goes out early in that game. I just think the Bengals are also getting right a little bit on defense and seem to kind of, be figuring out. Because I think Philly's actually, I don't know about you, don't you think Philly's kind of figuring it out? And like, I don't think that week or that loss last week is as bad as it looks.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I just, the only reason this is even a debate for me is I normally would lean heavy on the Bengals in this scenario. Pass rush is excellent. They have the opportunity and create turnovers and splash plays. And I don't trust Vegas to do anything. On the flip side, though, it's like, the Chargers, you have to assume, normally I would assume Jameis is going to be turnover prone and it's going to lead to that, but he didn't last week. And I don't want to lean on that. So I'm going to go Cincinnati.
Did you see, though, was it not the most Jameis thing ever that he threw the game losing interception right into Cal Hamilton's hands? And of course he drops it. And then Jameis, in typical fashion, throws a beautiful bomb ball for the touchdown on the very next play. I'm like, that is the Jameis Winston experience right there.
It is. And that's exactly why I've been just begging for him to play, because there's no, oh man, I almost lost it right there. I got to play it safe. It's like, oh shit. I shoot first, ask questions last. Let's go.
He's the new Brett Favre, right? Like, we've all been waiting for that next gunslinger. It's like, it's Jameis. He's the one that's not ever afraid to make that throw, man.
And I like Jameis. I think he's just a good person, great teammate. And I mean, it's fun that he's on a team that I don't think cares if they finish 7-9 or 7-10 or 4-12, the 4-13. God damn, all these fucking games now. I can't keep track of.
I just hope this turns into a Geno situation or a Sam Darnold or whatever, that all these teams need QBs. And if he plays well enough, I hope that he earns a chance, because we're seeing, more and more of, like, these guys were drafted really high because they were very talented, obviously.
Yep.
But I think these organizations are screwing them up and not doing them any favors. And maybe that's becoming the thing, is you find one who, 5-8 years into the league is starting to figure it out, and you bring them in, let them be your veteran QB. It's worked for Geno Smith. It's, working for Baker Mayfield. It's working for Sam. I would love for Jameis to get that chance.
Yep. You just have to convince a team that, as a gunslinger, which is what you're going to get,
you got to live with it. Right?
There will be turnovers. You have to take the good with the bad, and don't be so scared. I mean, turnovers are scary because that's the best recipe for a loss. We know that. You lose a turnover battle, you lose the game 9 times out of 10. But sometimes you have to embrace it. Like, we will embrace this question. Half point PPR. Pick 2 running backs. Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson Jr., Tyrone Tracy, Ramondre Stevenson. Definite conundrum. The Brian Robinson injury middle of the week, later in the week, has me removing him from one of my 2. Are you not concerned with?
No, I'm definitely concerned. It was just, I think his best game of the year was versus the Giants. It's kind of my only concern. We saw Najee, kind of beat this team up. What was that, last week? To me, Tyrone Tracy is the definite start with just what
Yep.
he's been doing. I can't sit him like until he basically stops, either running for 100 yards or scoring a touchdown. The Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson for me would be the question. I mean, the Colts have gotten a little better versus the run, right? Or no?
Well, yes, I even hate to look because like the thing, I don't want to look over just last couple games to show anything. Because if that was the case, then any running backs against Detroit, I would be like, yeah, start them against Detroit because their run defense has looked worse. But we know better than that. And I think but I still do think that Indianapolis, albeit has holes, they do appear to be getting better at it. I just don't know if I fully trust it.
Yeah, because they actually did a pretty good job versus Joe Mixon last week. 25 for 102, what he's been doing.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think I would lean with Aaron Jones just because at least with Robinson, you're dealing with Jaden Daniels, potential rushing touchdowns in the red zone and, Austin Eckler and everything else to where Aaron Jones is pretty much, even in games that I thought he wasn't going to play, he's been the lead back and got like 90% of the, rushing attempts. So I would probably go with him. And it's always fun to have a guy either on Sunday or Monday night that can, maybe save you if, say, you're down 5-6 points.
Exactly. That's the way I feel. Boston Billups wants to know Calvin Ridley, Tank Bigsby, if ETN is out, Xavier Legette, or TJ Hawkinson in his first week. Choose one. It's full point PPR.
Again, I know Ridley's coming off his best game. I don't want anything to do with that game.
This is true.
So I would probably lean Bigsby. Really, honestly, whether ETN's out or not. As for the other, is Hawkinson definitely back?
I mean, all signs point to him playing. He has passed everything, and I don't believe he has any injury tag.
I mean, if it wasn't such a good matchup for Legette, I would say, roll with Hawkinson. I probably would like to see, at least one sample size, kind of see like, what is his target volume and, that kind of deal, because you don't know anything. Do they plan on him playing 10 snaps? Do they plan on him playing 40 snaps? To where we know Legette is going to be on the field versus, again, a very bad Saints defense as of late. So I would probably lean Legette. But if you feel good about Hawkinson, I know if you have Hawkinson, you've been waiting on him probably all year, go ahead, let him go. You can trust your gut. He's one of the best tight ends in football when he's out there for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I hate the first week back, but I don't think the path to being heavily involved in an offense that is definitely much better than I had expected with Sam Darnold. There's no doubt. We're 9 weeks in. We know this. We've said it. Is that it clicked for him. It's a good offense. They kept it to his strengths, and he's taken full advantage. Ladd McConkey or Drake London?
I'm the biggest Ladd truther in the world. Like, he's my guy. I'm not sitting Drake London for Ladd McConkey. Drake is like a top 10 wide receiver week in and week out. I would ask, who are your other wide receivers that you're playing? Because, again, Ladd has a great matchup, how much the Browns run man. The number one corner's out. But I would definitely not sit Drake London. I mean, especially Diggs is banged up. Bland's out. Like, just trust me, London's going to get his. That's the one great thing about this Falcons offense is lately we know Bijan's going to get his, London's going to get his, and then Pitts is going to get some. And then it's just how much like Mooney, Ray, the rest of those guys go off.
Exactly. All right. Sound the alarm. Dylan needs help. His season's on the line. Dylan, it's very disappointing because it seems like you always trust us to answer your questions. And does that mean we have failed you every single week and you've lost as a result? Or is that because the other questions that weren't so obvious, the other team just must have scored a lot? So, but he keeps coming back. You don't come back. Well, some people do that. Like
I would say, but it's literally how abusive relationships usually they get in that cycle, right?
I know. Oh no. Are we the abusers? Oh boy, all right, I'm going to fix this. But we're going to start with 1 week at a time. It's full point PPR. These are different leagues. So we get it. So let's start with the one tight end, one flex between Ertz, Komet, Taysom Hill. Start there with that. What those 3 tight ends? Who are you putting in your lineup? First of all,
I'm going with Taysom. I'm going with Taysom Hill. Right? I mean, I think that he's going to get rush attempts.
Taysom Hill because he ruins everything for me.
I know.
Year, but
I get it.
Personal
I'm a
bias
Falcons
aside,
fan. Do you think I want to say Taysom Hill?
I know. We're going to say Taysom Hill. There's just it's too easy to see a path that it's him, Kamara, and Olave, and that's the entire offense for sure. How about a receiver between Cortland
because
Sutton?
Jamal Williams and Miller. I didn't even know Jamal Williams is out too. Oh yeah, it is definitely 100% Taysom Hill week because they're not giving Kamara all the carries.
No, not at all. All right, Cortland Sutton, Bucky, or Christian Watson.
So Watson has historically been pretty good versus man, which again Detroit runs at a very high rate. But I have a hard time not playing Cortland Sutton versus this really bad secondary that we keep talking about in Baltimore. I like what I saw from him last week versus Carolina. There was some like scary stuff when you look how much like Franklin and some of these other guys, Bailey, were getting involved in the offense. And it looks like it's kind of returned back to the norm where he is their clear-cut number one, going to run the most routes, get the most targets, wide receiver.
I think he was the only receiver that ran more than 60% of the routes. I mean, that's just 60%, which let's say that you talk about target opportunity. I mean, he hogs all of that just in general. And then we see an improving Bo Nix against a bad secondary. So, yes, I'm in agreement with you there. Start second league. All right, we got you 1 win. Let's go for 2 for 2. We're going to start one quarterback between Kyler Murray or Baker. Man, I hate to start or sit Baker as good as he's been. Just don't want to start him. The Chiefs defense is I'm saying this not because of the shirt that I'm wearing, take it off, but they're borderline getting to the historic trend as far as keeping opponents below 27 points. We're talking 05, I think it was, 06 Ravens, who was the last defense to do that.
I hate you guys. I really do. Like, it's not enough that you have like the greatest quarterback potentially of all time already. And now you have, arguably one of the greatest defenses in recent memory. And then how does your defensive coordinator just keep coming back? Like, I don't understand that. This guy is like the GOAT of defensive coordinators, in my opinion, at this point. Because he was with the Giants twice, right, too?
Yeah. He was the head coach in St. Louis, and he was
that's
garbage.
Right. Yeah.
He was horrible head coach.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad that he's the defensive coordinator and stays there. So he can do what he does the best. St. Louis, when St. Louis had brought in, they had an opportunity to take 2 of maybe some of the arguably best at their individual offensive and defensive coordinator positions, become head coach with the team, and then basically lost all privileges to ever be a head coach again. That's what St. Louis can do for you. So are you leaning Kyler Murray?
No, I agree. No, I do. I agree with you. Like, Baker looked great last week. That was against my Falcons, which again, that's 4th worst pass rush / sacks through 8 weeks since 2000. So like, I want to see Baker without Evans and Godwin versus a really good. Now, if he does it this week, I will say, man, I was wrong. And look at Baker. Like, I won't doubt him again, but I just want to see what he can do versus a legit pass rush, a legit, defense. So I would go with Kyler for sure. Yeah. And I mean, also he has more rushing upside as much as Baker's kind of ran this year. Like, Kyler can get his with his legs.
Yeah. He's been totally supported by his legs. All right. Dobbins or Josh Jacobs at the first running back position?
I actually like Jacobs. I mean, you even see last week, Derrick Henry, the best running back in football, they kind of controlled him. Like, the Browns were able to sort of keep him out. I know, like, overall, I think his numbers were okay, but it was just the fact of how little he ran that showed that I think that the Ravens thought, look, we're not going to be able to just pound it on this Browns team. Like, that's not going to work. And as I said, the Chargers have been throwing it a lot more after the bye, a lot on first down. And I think they're realizing, like, we're going to have to, get Herbert going if we really want to win games and move on into the future. And I think that is definitely the weakness of this Browns team right now is, with their best Ward's out this week. I can't pronounce the linebacker, but he's out. He's like one of their best cover linebackers. Like they're gonna try to throw it. So I like Jacobs versus a Detroit team that they've been giving up some rushing yards lately. And I think with Love, you're just going to see them lean on Jacobs a little bit more with him, battling that growing injury.
Yep. And then the last one is, and tell me if you disagree, it's Terry McLaurin. I know maybe Josh Downs is your 2 in that scenario.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, this would be another one of those questions with Downs. Like, I can't sit Terry McLaurin, but with Downs, I would ask, like, who are your other wide receivers? Because Downs with Flacco is different. Across the board metrics, like a top 10 wide receiver this year. It's a small sample size. I get that. But, target rate, like all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Tell you what, let's do some rapid fire questions here so that we can try, because I know people put these in quite a bit ago, and I don't know if maybe Jorge could have answered some of these too. This is the problem is I think some of these he may have done, but let's start with this one since G6. Thank you for the cash.
Absolutely.
All right, Devontae Smith or Jaden Reed? Do you trust your gut like he does and says Jaden Reed? Or do you go with the brain, a stupid brain that always seems to win in the end, even though the gut feeling feels so much better when it
your gut is right here, G6, because the deal is another team that runs a ton of man defense is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And unfortunately for Devontae Smith, on the other side is the best wide receiver in football versus man, AJ Brown, who, it is outrageous. He's getting like a 40% target rate versus man. He's scoring over 3 points still now, like 5 games into it per target versus man defense fantasy points. So I just think when you count on the fact that Jags are a bad run defense, so Hurts and Barkley are going to do damage. I just think the Packers need Reed so much more this week than the Eagles are going to need Devontae Smith. So, I just straight up like Reed more, even though I know that his numbers versus man haven't been great this year. But if you go back to last year, they were really good. And I think it's more of just a circumstance deal through 7-8 weeks. And they're going to use him in the biggest game of the season. He's their best wide receiver, in my opinion.
Oh, man. Before you went into the explanation, I was firmly on the Devontae Smith side. Just everything about it, as far as safety, security, not believing that the situation in Green Bay could be another Romeo Dobbs greasy wheel game. It could be a Christian Watson game. All these scenarios where I don't see any way that it's in Philly, not a AJ Brown or not a Devontae Smith. It's either of those two options. But that is the fact that it could be AJ Brown with the 35 to 40% target share and then Saquon for the remainder. Devontae Smith on a 15 to 16% target share just doesn't equate to the Jaden Reed upside potential. So right there, hopefully that helps. Baker Murray, we answered that one. In a different question, we both agree it's Kyler Murray. Uzi and Aboof wants to know it's Tyrone Tracy, Jaden Reed, Brian Thomas Jr. in a flex PPR. Is he is he crazy for going Tyrone Tracy?
No, not at all. Again, Tracy has been absolutely incredible. And the biggest issue is without Andrew Thomas, the Giants have real issues throwing the ball. So what does that mean? You're going to run the ball more, which we've seen, and then you're going to throw it to your running backs and those underneath guys, which Tyrone Tracy, for anyone who's not listening, which is probably not breaking news because everybody knows this, he was a wide receiver in college up until his final year. So he can catch passes as well. I actually do like Tracy slightly more because the Eagles corners are all of a sudden starting to play a lot better. Thomas is, banged up. He would be the other guy that I would probably be really pushing for out of those guys. But I love Tracy this week. I just think this guy could end up being a league winner the rest of the way potentially.
Nice. And that kind of goes along with the question that S'mores has between Ramondre and Tyrone Tracy. And we both agree that it's Tyrone Tracy there. And then you think Cedric Tillman or Kate Otten, or do you go and then Kate Otten over Jalen Waddle? I can't go that far. I'm taking Otten over. I think I'm taking Otten over Tillman even.
The Tillman one is tougher for me only because, like, if you look at his volume, Jameis has played one game in one drive, and he's seen 11 targets basically in that one game and one drive with Jameis Winston. I think again, this is where probably my DFS brain gets a little too wired. Like, I'm not afraid to week just be like, I like this better, but I like Tillman more than Waddle this week. And there's no way I can sit Kate Otten right now with just out Evans and Godwin because he's the one guy that Baker trusts. And your guys, like, that's actually the one position Chiefs have had some issues with, right? It's tight end.
Correct. It's And that is 100%. I'll have Otten as my, as a top 3-4 option this week, all day. How about between Marvin Harrison Jr., Josh Jacobs, and Brian Thomas Jr.? Full point PPR.
We know Brian Thomas, have they said he's definitely playing?
Definitely has not been said, but projected to play.
Oh yeah. I think I'd go with Jacobs. I mean, it's just, God, it's hard to set Brian Thomas Jr. right now, but I do think that Green Bay is going to really lean on Josh Jacobs this week with, Jordan Love banged up. Again, this is a massive, massive game between these two teams. And I just think that they're not going to throw it quite as much as they've kind of been willing to in other games. So I lean Jacobs slightly. Harrison Jr., I can't trust that guy right now. So, but Brian Thomas Jr., it's really close. Like, if you want to play him, I have no problem with, but I'd slightly lean Jacobs.
I would too. And it's the amount or lack thereof of weapons in Jacksonville is frightening because no Gabe Davis, no Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram's going to have a heavy workload.
Parker Washington time, everybody.
Parker Washington. I do have to start Parker Washington in the league, and I'm not.
For DFS, for sure. 3,600 on DraftKings. Don't be afraid to put them in some lineups.
It is not DFS, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it is. It's the Kings Classic League, which is always fun, where everybody else already is. There's no waiver wire to be had in that league, and it makes it very difficult. So, morning, looky.
Hey, what's going on?
How you doing, buddy?
Good.
We were just getting ready to jump into a couple more questions, but let's see. I'll try to find one that fits your forte, which is all of them. So I'm not even going to do that. We'll just go.
JT, you're a Steelers fan? I did not know that. Is that a Steelers hat, right?
Yeah. Grew up a Steelers guy. I got Colts season tickets, so I kind of root for both. So I'm not in my usual setup here. So sorry if I sound a little funky or whatever. I'm actually not at my house, and I'm on an iPad instead of my computer. So Jorge asked me to jump on, so I'm jumping on and talking football with you guys this morning a little bit.
No, you're a good man.
Yeah, no doubt. That's dedication right there. And it looks your connection and your sound and your screen looks better than most that have an actual setup. So
I got a nice got a nice new iPad. I'm on a board of a hospital, and they give us these iPads so we can do Zoom meetings and stuff everywhere we're at. It's like a brand new iPad. I'm like, the other one I had was like 8 years old, so this thing's like super high tech and nice compared to the one I used to have. Nice.
Well, speaking of better than what they used to have, the Miami Dolphins have a much better quarterback situation, as proven, as they head to Buffalo. Buffalo is 6.5 point home favorites with a 49.5 point total. Zach Seiler's out for the Dolphins. Kader Kohu is out. Javon Holland is doubtful, which is obviously a lot of pieces across that Miami defense. On the flip side for Buffalo, Amari Cooper was limited on Friday. Looks to be a true game time decision. The obvious plays, if you will, Josh Allen, Devon Achane, James Cook, Tyreek. I think if Cooper doesn't play, Khalil Shakir is one of my, obvious plays, but there's not a ton of additional weapons other than like you look at some ancillary pieces, JT, like Raheem Mostert. Are you gonna trust Raheem Mostert against a Buffalo defense in anything more than a flex option this week?
No, I've got him in a couple spots. I've got to play him, but it's just out of pure necessity. I just don't have guys that got injuries. So Mozart's a guy I'm playing only in a flex if I have to. I'm not expecting. We saw the touchdowns last week were nice, but it wasn't like he was getting a bunch of carries and he didn't have a lot of yards. So that makes me a little nervous. So you're hoping, if you're playing him, you're hoping you get a touchdown out of him. Another kind of desperation move from this game for me in a lot of areas is Ray Davis. I have a couple other teams where I'm just super short on running back and I just don't have very deep teams. And as soon as a guy is on bye or someone gets hurt, I'm in trouble. And so Ray Davis is an RB2 for me in a couple situations, which I wish I could play him in a flex if I had to, but I'm desperate in a couple leagues at running back. So I think the Bills are going to look good in this game. So I'm taking Ray Davis because I think he's going to have a shot to get some touches and possibly outside touchdowns. So he's not a play that I'm like, go out there and absolutely smash play Ray Davis. But if you're like looking at your lineup going, man, I got to get somebody in an RB spot. Who do I play between all these backup running backs? Ray Davis is the one I'm kind of leaning on in quite a few situations, hoping that he gets some touches and is successful with them. Is like, the offenses look better for the Dolphins. I mean, obviously Tua makes a huge difference, but I still think the Bills offense is going to roll on this Miami defense.
Yeah, the defense is it was not exactly cohesive prior to losing the pieces they had, and it's not getting any better. If Keith, anybody else in this specific game, feels like we've kind of touched on everybody that may have questions or concerns with any playmakers.
Yeah, I just think that A-Chain's going to have a monster game regardless of the game script. You just look with him in 2 starts. He had been averaging 26 points. I think it was in 7 starts with him, and then he went out and scored 26 points in his return. So him at 6,700 on DraftKings, definitely somebody you should highly consider playing. But I agree with you guys that I think Buffalo rolls. But don't be concerned about Josh Allen because I know, again, that first game they ran all over him. He had 9 points. The previous 4, I just looked it up, he has at least 25.7 points in the other 4 games versus McDaniel-led Dolphins teams.
That game was so out of control. None of this. I take that game as an out. Like last year when Miami put up the 750 points or whatever it was.
On Denver,
Yeah, I eliminated that game from my evaluation of Denver's defense as well as Miami's offense because it's just such an outlier, which we do in stats all the time. You remove an outlier and you get more towards the norm. And I think that week against that Buffalo, that last matchup was a complete outlier. I mean, the turnovers, just the short yardage work. It was
Tua being knocked out early. Everything could have gone wrong, went wrong.
It was really bad. Couple questions here. So Rob wants to know, what's up, guys? Good morning to you, Rob. Start 3. Spillane, Pratt. Oh, no, so this is for you, JT. Keith, you can take
action.
it.
I was like, what the hell? I've never heard of these guys. Oh, they're just good defense.
So you're starting 3 of these. So number 1, let's talk about the question or the concern that I had earlier is that Ernest Jones was a late addition to the injury report, and there's a chance that he might not play. Is that something? Are you rolling the dice on it, or are you just basically saying I don't want any piece of that type of?
I think Jones is going to end up being really good there. I'm always when a guy goes to a new team, I'm always struggling about being the guy that like I don't want to play him that first week on that new team. Just like because you're like, how much does he really know? Like, what part of the defense I think is a little easier than offense in some regards there, but. To me, Spillane and Pratt are absolute starts. I'm on those 2 guys. I think those are hands down. You're starting those guys. Don't worry about it. The question for me is Ernest Jones on a new team or Trayvon Wallace with Josie Jewell back for the Panthers. And I was trying to look up real quick what Wallace, because Wallace without Josie Jewell was a start. Now with Josie Jewell back, the question is, do you still think he's a start? I was going to look up his stats from last week when actually Jewell was back.
Yeah, and that's always the truth. Like, if Ernest Jones doesn't play, then any production is going to be better than than no
Yes.
production, regardless. I would also say maybe is there an option out there, Rob, that if you're still with us, that you can go with the waiver wire and potentially look, because if with Josie Jewell back, is Trayvon Wallace droppable for you?
I mean, I like Trayvon Wallace, so if you're in a short bench, maybe you drop him. I like him long term on this team, especially with all the injuries. Some couple of the guys that got hurt are, older players. I think they're going to want to go to Wallace in the
Mhm.
future. So it just kind of depends on, is it a redraft team? Is the dynasty? Do you have enough
Right.
spots? If it's a short bench, yeah, you're probably dropping them because you need guys that you can play right now. If it's a deeper dynasty league, I want Wallace. I looked at the last couple games. So even after he had that monster 15 tackle game against the Bears, he had
Mhm.
9 tackles against Atlanta, 7 versus the Commanders, and 4 last week against the Broncos with a forced fumble. So you're still getting some production there for Wallace. I would be keeping my eye. If Jones plays, I think you could throw him in there. But if you cannot watch right up to game time and figure out if he's playing or not, I would go Wallace just because I've said this many a time. Nothing makes me more angry than taking a 0 from a guy that either starts the game and immediately gets hurt and goes out, or is a game time decision and in the last second they don't play him and you get a 0 in your lineup. That drives me crazy. Because of the Ernest Jones thing with the new team and the injury designation, I am probably going Trayvon Wallace here, just because he's going to see some snaps. It might
Mhm.
not be the snap share you want, but he's going to see something.
Right. Will says that, I think you guys are misinformed about Ernest Jones. He came in and played 100% of the snaps last week and smashed with Seattle, which is true. But there was a late designation. Mike McDonald had said that he had a neck issue that popped up, and that's why they kept him out of practice, and they're going to have to take it, quote unquote, day by day. And there were reports that it was not a positive neck issue, that they're like they would be better served letting him maybe potentially sit out. And so
Yeah, Nate, I think also maybe Will was talking. I think I misspoke a little bit. I was talking about when Ernest Jones came last week. I was a little nervous about a guy that just got there. You know what I'm
oh,
saying?
gotcha.
And I think I misspoke on that. So Will is right. I wasn't meaning he got there this week. I mean, last week I was a little more nervous about starting him when the first day he was there. But
Yeah.
after he played last week, I'm like, oh yeah, you like him now. Like if he's playing, you got to play him. Will, I appreciate you pointing that out, because that was me. I definitely misspoke on that. So I meant I was more nervous last week about putting him in the lineup than this week. The injury is the only thing that's got me nervous now. So like I said, if you can wait till game time and you can
Mhm.
get up there a little bit closer and you can be like, hey, I can wait and then I can make that substitution. The only problem is I think, aren't the Seahawks playing the afternoon game and the Panthers playing the early game? So
Yeah.
that's the only thing that's going to get you, is you can't wait. You can't wait to see if Ernest Jones goes out. So for me, I'm putting Wallace in. I don't want to take the chance at the 0. If they were playing at the same time, I think you could wait till right up to game time. But for me, I know it's going to hurt if Ernest Jones plays and gets really nice production. But man, I'm nervous about taking that 0 with anything with a neck issue. Man, you just barely tackle someone wrong and re-injure that thing. Ugh. So
Mhm.
I'm probably going Wallace. And thank you, Will, for pointing that out. I did misspoke. I made it sound like Jones got traded there this week, and I was talking about last week when he first came over.
Yeah, not a big deal whatsoever. We good morning, and yes, that is exactly
Hey,
right.
Johnny McGlynn. Hope things are going well, man.
Good to see John again. Hung out with see him Friday, which was always a pleasure. And I think he's working right now. Not 100%. I shouldn't say it, because if he's working, he's definitely not on here with us.
He's definitely not working.
Definitely not working.
He's
Yeah.
definitely not working.
Definitely
I
not
know what you're
working.
talking about.
He's not at all. Sorry. Wrong number. Cade, good morning. What's up? Brian Thomas, Brian Robinson, Lad McConkey, or Tony Pollard as a flex in full point PPR. Pollard news, I don't know much more about as far as if he's going to play. He's been limited all week. The Brian Thomas is another limited issue. Brian Robinson is another injury issue. Lad McConkey's the full, health factor. But full point PPR, flex play, which way you leaning?
I'm going Lad here. Lad's been good. They're finding him. He's getting worked in the offense, plus all the other injury designations with these guys. I mean, I don't know if you guys talked about this earlier on the show before I jumped on. Did you guys talk about Brian Thomas at all? Like,
We just got done covering couple of the questions about Brian Thomas.
okay, because like he's another one. I've got a ton of Brian Thomas, and am I the only one that's like a little surprised that he's like a game time decision? When he first got hurt, they were like saying like 2 to 4 weeks, maybe more, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, he might play this week," and I'm like, "Huh?" I'm like, I did not see that one coming. So, I would love to see him play. I've got him everywhere, but I'm nervous because I'm like, when you say initial designation is maybe 4 weeks for a guy, and then all of a sudden you say, I don't think he's going to miss a game. That makes me nervous. So I'm playing him if I absolutely have to, but I took him out of my lineups, and I've got him in a ton of leagues. But I took him out of my lineup in a lot of leagues because I'm just nervous about that. I'm going to try to keep an eye and see what they say up to the game, but that one's got me nervous. I'm playing Ladd in this scenario for sure, just because he's healthy, and it seems like the Chargers are throwing the ball a little bit more, and Herbert's getting comfortable with him.
Yeah, yep, we did. And Keith threw in a couple a little additional stats for Ladd's support. As far as
he's a man eater, is what he is.
Oh, yep. And then this would be normally where we cue Jorge up, and he would start singing. At the time, well, here she comes.
I'm not going to try to replace Jorge and sing.
The real winners
is
all of our listeners that Jorge's not here right now in that situation.
For the 158 that came in to listen to Jorge sing or someone sing are now leaving. 2 people still here that are here for anything else, and I do want to apologize to G6 earlier because I did overlook the super chat question. We did get to it luckily. Hopefully you were in to hear it. If not,
he did hear it, but I do want to apologize. You got the B team when it comes to running the board, and me and Nate, and that's on us. So sorry about that.
There were if you've never done streaming, there's like 50 questions on the side that were all starred up, and like 10 of them had been answered before, and I didn't know who starred them if someone else did. So it is a little choppy. That's why I try to keep my focus on one thing only. I don't have time.
Usually I try to run the chat when I'm on here, but like I said, I don't have my normal setup, so I don't have the chat. I can't actually see the chat like I normally can. So usually I try to jump on and run the chat so that you guys can concentrate. And I'm like going through the questions.
So I do apologize. If anybody, again, if you have questions and I miss them, then ask them again, or just direct message any one of us, and I'm sure we'll, answer them at that point too. But real quick before. Maybe we can answer some of the questions by breaking down some of the games, because there's a lot with the Carolina game. As far as the questions goes, it feels like every question has at least one piece of the Carolina side, which is crazy. But that's where we're at in week 9 is, this is New Orleans going on the road to Carolina. New Orleans 7-point favorites without a lot of their pieces, 43.5-point total. Derek Carr's returning. Marshawn Lattimore's out. Kool-Aid McKinstry's out. Bub Means is put on the IR. Kendre Miller on the IR. We said earlier Jamal Williams isn't playing. So really a lack of pieces in New Orleans. On the Carolina side, their starting tackle, Ekwonu, is out. Adam Thielen was, of course, on the IR. Xavier Legette's been limited all week due to a toe injury. We're starting Alvin Kamara. We're starting Chris Olave. It sounds like we're pretty much in favor of we're starting Taysom Hill in a lot of places. It's not a must start, but it's a good start. And what do we think is going to happen with Jonathan Brooks? Will he play this week? Will he not? Will it have any effect on anything else?
You were the one I think that brought this up a couple of weeks ago, Nate. That what is the point now with a running back who you've invested, obviously, getting him a lot of snaps and play this year when we've seen with running backs, mileage, injuries, etc. I understand you want to get his feet wet, but when you have Hubbard, who's been playing really well, I would not risk him potentially being injured again. So you're in the same situation going into next year by giving him a heavy workload. So I think he obviously will get some of Hubbard's work, but I know the Panthers aren't the best run organization, but I would hope that they're smart enough to realize let's not play this guy a ton and risk injury when we have a very competent running back already. and our season's over. I mean, let's be honest, we're potentially now just playing for the number 1 pick, which they do own this year, right? Like, I'm not wrong in that. They do have their, yeah.
They have definitely not given up the every piece that they had, which I'm sure. If you think you're going to trade with well, you know what? I was getting ready to say, if you think you're going to trade with Carolina, you'd be wrong, because they're probably so gun shy they would never pull off another trade. Like get rid of Deontay Johnson for was that a 5th or 4th? Okay, well, maybe Carolina is a good trade partner. Who knows? But they're a good opportunity for New Orleans offense, that's for sure. We know that. So as far as Kamara, we talked about Taysom, Chris Olave. I don't really think there's not too many other pieces in that Saints offense that we're going to start in our flex, right, JT? Nothing that stands out as far as a hey, if then scenario.
Now, the only other guy you would even play is if you're like desperate for a tight end and you put in Juwan Johnson.
Sure.
But like that, I mean, that's like, you're like, I don't have any top tight ends. I got nobody else to play. Who can I throw in this week? Juwan Johnson. I don't love the play, but if you had to, he's a guy you could go with. And then I've been playing Chuba pretty consistently because he's just been good. Like, and they keep giving the ball, so I don't see any reason not to play him or get nervous about not playing him. I'd play him. And then Xavier Legette, I think, is a decent flex if you're one of those spots again where you've got guys on bye or you got injuries piling up, and you're like, who can I put in? No more Deontay Johnson. He should see some looks. I mean, so might as well run him out there if you have to.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about Jalen Coker as being the guy there. The question is can Bryce Young, will Bryce Young be able to support a wide receiver 2 on the week, a wide receiver 3, multiple wide receivers? And if so, then that's great. I'd be color me shocked a little bit, because Carolina, with their propensity to run the ball as well as they've done against a New Orleans defense that has been just massacred on the ground. But I think that it's crazy that we might actually, like Keith said, he wants no piece of the Tennessee game, and I agree with that. I actually want pieces in this game. I think this might be that 43.5 total might go over. So it'll be something to pay attention to. Las Vegas, Cincinnati at home, 7-point favorites, 45-point total there. For Vegas, Robert Spillane didn't practice, 3 different times this week. I don't know what his report is as of this morning. I guess I could check that out and find out if there's any updated news, but it's he hasn't been ruled out. So I don't know if it's because he left the game against the Chiefs. He had some help off the field, but he was on the pregame workout with the Raiders, doing drills this morning. Obviously optimistic, if you will, but it looks like there's some reports that he was having conversations with the trainers and with the head coach staff. So pay attention to Robert Spillane situation, especially for one of the questions that we answered earlier. I know that Spillane was one of the options there. If Spillane is out, Chase Brown is a play. We haven't seen a lot of questions about Chase Brown yet this morning, which I don't know if I'm surprised or not, but Zach Moss has been, ruled out doubtful this week. T. Higgins is doubtful. Orlando Brown is doubtful. None of them been ruled out yet, but I believe all 3 will be ruled out. How good of a play can Chase Brown be this week, Keith? RB,
oh man,
I mean,
this is what I'm waiting for, man. Like, if you're somebody like he's had Chase Brown, like, this is the dream, because not to quote you, Nate, but Zach Moss is trash. So it's nice that he's out. This is a great matchup with no T. Higgins. I would assume that since he might lean on the run a little bit more just in general. And I mean, this guy has done very well in recent weeks versus tough defenses, sharing a backfield with Zach Moss. This week, it's against a bad run defense with no Zach Moss. I would have Chase Brown probably in definitely my top 12, probably top 10 running back plays this week.
I'm right there.
I love it. I think it's great. I mean, I own so much Chase Brown. I love Chase Brown. So like I'm fired up. I'm like, I got him in every lineup. I'm like, I need a big week out of Chase Brown. I mean, if you watch the last 3 weeks, I think, of Zach Moss, it's been
rough.
horrifying. I mean, he's averaging like 1.9, 2.1 or something yards per carry. It's just awful. He's got a couple catches that are the only things that have even made him reasonable. To me, this is great because now they got to stick with Chase Brown. And so I think they're going to be much more explosive with Chase on offense. I think he's a much better player. I've been saying it for a while now, since before the season started. I was like, he should be the man. I think this is Cincy's chance to kind of like, okay, we're officially going to run him in, and Moss is the clear-cut backup after this. So I think if Chase Brown can have a huge game, I think it helps every fantasy manager that owns him going forward the rest of the season.
Oh, there you go. Should you flex Chase Brown or Devonta Smith?
I'm playing Chase in that
Let's
situation.
do it.
I just think he's gonna has a chance to get a ton of touches today against the Raiders. That's not that I'm not. I would play Devonta if I could too in a lot of leagues, but if I had to go between those two, I'm going Chase.
Yeah, AJ Brown versus man. Jaguars really bad versus the run. Like, to me, that's enough to where I can fade Devonta, especially with a player that I love this week, like Chase Brown, for sure.
What about on the other side of the ball? Alexander Madison, Bengals D. We know. I mean, I don't know why have been porous at best. Like there's so many good IDP options as far as that, and we know IDP relevancy doesn't always equate to good actual football on the field. But they've. Can you start it with with Faith Madison?
You talking about like winging a prayer? Yeah. I mean,
at this point,
sure.
We're on a bye week. It's week 9. I mean,
if it's a PPR league, I definitely could. If it's a non-PPR league or a half PPR league, I would have real hesitation, because that's where he's basically been feasting, is in catching passes. And he could do that, obviously, if you think, since he's going to be up big and have a lot of opportunity. But I don't love it, obviously this week. But you got to sometimes do what you got to do. And he's going to at least get volume. We know that. Zamir White, again, sorry for pumping him up this summer. He's dead. So from a fantasy standpoint.
I didn't listen to you, so it's fine. I tried my best to. It's hard to argue against Keith a lot of times, because he comes with, data bombs like pow, and I have to avoid them and just say, I don't care about data, which is something that I'm normally 100% in favor of.
Right.
Unfortunately, my eyeballs said he ain't good, but I don't know everything.
And you were correct.
I've been more wrong. I've been wrong a lot more than I've been right. I just hold on to the right calls and don't. And selective
never
memory
let go.
Forgets.
Yeah,
selective memory. What about this? TJ Hawkinson, first week back. Mark Andrews. We said earlier, Keith, the Andrews usage and trust has returned. I want another week. I want a week with Hawkinson before I can ever trust that completely.
I agree. The only thing I would push back again is the same thing I said earlier, is if you've been holding on to Hawkinson this long, obviously you're excited about him, you believe in him. Like, I'm not gonna, hate on you for playing him. I'm just somebody that I like to at least have a sample size before I, go all in on a guy.
I'm right there with you. JT, how about this one? Half point PPR. You're sitting one. So you get to sit Malik Neighbors, you get to sit Puka, you get to sit Terry McLaurin or Brian Robinson Jr.
Oh, that one's a toughie. Neighbors and McLaurin are in for me. Like, you're playing those guys. The question is the Puka knee injury. They say he's going to give it a go, but that always makes me nervous when teams are like, oh, he's going to give it a go. Oh, okay. What does that mean? And then the Brian Robinson injury. Sounds like he's going to play from everything I've seen. Is that what you guys are hearing? He's going to give it a go. So that's a toss up for me between those two. Gosh, it's like injury versus injury. Do you need, half point PPR? Gosh, Puka, though, when he plays, he's so good. Oh, man, this was a tough one for me. I'm leaning playing Puka this week. If he gives it a go and he plays, I just feel like he's going to be good, or he wouldn't play. So I'm leaning Puka. I'm not sure how you guys feel about the B-Rob. Jorge, how do you feel about the B-Rob injury?
We just saw the Pittsburgh Steelers run all over the New York Giants last week. So honestly, flip a coin, and I don't think you can go wrong either way.
I fell for this last week. Won't fall for it again. If Puka is playing, I'm playing. Because last week I unfortunately was one of the dumb people who did not take him off his IR and put him in the lineup because we heard about snap counts and all this, and then he ended up. It was just the Puka that we all know and love from last year. So I can't sit him. And again, those other receivers, like I can't sit any of those three receivers. If it was a traditional league, maybe you could talk me into Robinson over them. But when I'm getting half a point per reception with all three of them being the main focal points and their passing offenses from a target, standpoint, even with Cup, and Puka playing last week, Puka saw more targets. I'd play those three receivers. And what a draft, by the way, JT, good God. Great receiving core.
Oh, I know. You're loaded up there. That's nice. Nice job by my counterpart, JT. Nice work by you. I got a quick question for you guys because I've got this matchup in a ton of my lineups, and this is a classic me because I draft the guys I like all the time. I've got a quarterback question. 2 of the 3 in Superflex. Are you playing Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, or Justin Herbert? If you took 2 of the 3, which one of those guys are you sitting? Because I'm on the fence on all 3 of them. They're really closely, as far as points wise, they're supposed to be the same. I'm like, who am I playing? I just can't decide.
Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, and Justin Herbert.
Oh, Herbert. I love Herbert this week. I'll keep saying it since the bye. Double the passing yards, 12 more pass attempts per game. Big thing, Chargers are throwing it on first down at the highest rate in the NFL since week 6. So, to me, he's automatic. Not to mention the rushing, which Cleveland, I know they've played Lamar and some guys, but 5 different QBs with 20-plus rushing yards against them, 4 different QBs with 40-plus rushing yards versus them. Herbert had, I think, 40 yards rushing just last week alone. And then on the other one, again, I always lean to the guy that's more likely to run, and I think that's Drake May. So I would slightly have him over Lawrence. My only concern would be Lawrence might be in garbage time a lot more, and sometimes that's a great thing for fantasy, right? Where if Philly's up a bunch, he's just, in chuck it mode, and Philly doesn't really care, if they score points or not at that point. But I would lean probably May and Herbert, but I don't like Herbert would be the definite one for me, and then it's which one of May or Lawrence would you start?
Yeah, I think Keith, that's where I'm at. I'm like, are we going to get Trevor Lawrence garbage points at the end of this game, or is May in Tennessee? Is it going to be so low scoring and back and forth defensively that no one's taking big chances, and so it's a really low scoring game? So that's where I'm nervous on the May side. I do like May a lot in this game, but I'm like, man, is this going to be a really low scoring game where both teams just don't want to turn it over and don't want to make a mistake, and so no one tries much, and then all of a sudden you see Trevor Lawrence out there just chucking it the whole second half because they're losing by 3 scores.
Right.
So that's kind of my toss up where I'm thinking, like I said, I have this in 10 different leagues I can decide between these 3 guys. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
The rest of the Vegas Cincinnati matchup is pretty much composed of players that we know we're going to start. We know we're going to start Brock Bowers, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. The lack of T. Higgins opens up one other pass catcher. Is that going to be Mike Gesicki or Yoshavash? Jorge, you have a preference? Gesicki's been really good without T. Higgins.
Yeah. Higgins currently is doubtful, right? Or have they ruled him out?
I don't think they've ruled any of them out yet, but I think that they all are trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's hard for me to fade Yoshivas. I think I'd go the wide receiver in this situation.
That's fair. I mean, most people don't have a situation where they have to choose between Mike Gesicki and
I'm going Gesicki. I actually have this situation in a couple leagues. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going Gesicki just because Oshava, he had that nice little run for a while there, and he's been real quiet the last couple weeks. I mean, real quiet as far as not even getting a reception and getting 2 to 3 targets max. Feels like Gesicki's finally working his way in there. And like you said, whenever Higgins has been out, Gesicki's actually been the guy that's been a little bit better as far as getting some more targets. So especially if you have any kind of tight end premium, even if it's small, like 0.25, but if it's 1.5, I'm playing Gesicki in this spot.
All right. Before we jump into the Chargers and Browns game, a couple quick questions we'll have. Jorge, you wanted that one?
Yeah, I got you. Yep.
Thanks, buddy. All right, guys. Oh, speaking of Alexander Madison, Ramondre. Keith,
Oh,
punch in the face or kick in the nuts? What do you
right.
want?
I guess I'll lean Stevenson, but again, just like going back and look, he's been so much better with Brissett, which is the exact opposite of what you would think. But all of his best games have actually came with Jacoby Brissett, has played a majority of the snaps for the Pats. But the volume I think is going to be there with him, and I think that their pass catching upside is pretty similar with the two of them. So I would just lean Stevens because he's a better runner.
Gotcha. Then he also needs to know Tony Pollard or Tyrone Tracy. I think we've all pretty much agreed it's Tyrone Tracy in this scenario.
Yeah, I'd be very careful with Pollard this week in general. Not practicing all week. Like, he may play, but that, we saw that with like Jordan Mason, I think, right, where he didn't practice all week and then he got hurt the first or second rush of the game. So just, be careful of that if you're playing him.
What about same scenario? Do you have to dig far enough down to go to Mooney over Pollard to not, trust in the upside of or downside of Pollard?
I mean, I guess this would be one of those situations of, and I know people kind of look at this as a non-answer, but if it is a close matchup, right, where it could go either way, I would, play Mooney, right? But if you're looking for the upside, I actually think it's Pollard, because New England, their run defense has been atrocious the last like 5-6 weeks, and it's getting worse. So if Pollard's a go, there's obviously big upside with him, but I worry when a guy doesn't even practice at all, because even Daniels, right? He was, I know, a limited participant, I think, last Friday, and that was when we first saw, okay, maybe he plays on Sunday, and obviously he did.
Gotcha. And last but not least, nope, he has one. Sam Darnold or Bo Nix. I don't need that up. That's oh man, we talked earlier. Bo Nix is rushing upside, mixed in with the decent matchup or great matchup. But then again, Sam Darnold has been just, so good that and with added weapons, I don't know. JT, I'll let you see what you think.
I'm going Darnold here. I feel like Darnold's going to have a big game this week, Sunday night against the Colts. The Colts have been on the field more than almost any defense in the league this year. They're going to be on the field a lot. I'm going Darnold. I picked him up in a couple spots where, like in one QB leagues, I could get a nice spot start out of him. I like him this week. I know the Knicks matchup's a solid matchup, but for me, with the weapons, I'm leaning Darnold.
There you go. And then, I'll go to the question that you had up there from Sal. Good morning. What's up? 10-team PPR. We're starting 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. So we'll start with the running backs. Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, or Ramondre. So 2 of those, Taylor and Achane?
Yeah.
Okay. Wide receivers. Garrett Wilson put up 30. Congratulations. That's a great start. So now, knowing that, are you guys leaning to say I'm going pure upside on these next 2, if not 3? Do you want to blend a good floor with the high upside, or is it just pretty easy that you're leaning 2 of the 3 anyway? So it's
Downs is a must start, right?
I think so. I'm Downs all the way for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on Downs.
And the nice thing is there's a flex spot too, and we're not putting Ramondre in our flex, I don't think, over any of these receivers, correct? Okay, so who are you sitting between DJ Moore, JSN, or Tillman?
Still really like Tillman until I want to see somebody actually stop him with Jameis before I'm just out on him, because the target volume has been incredible. Jameis, I think the 51 passes he's thrown the last 2 weeks, 11 of them have gone to Tillman. So you're getting 20%, basically of, pass attempts. He's their big play guy, which, Jameis likes to throw it down the field. And I just keep saying this about the Chargers. I know statistically they look good. Their first 3 matchups, Bo Nix in his first ever start, Jacoby Brissett. And then he got Miami with Skylar Thompson and Tim Bowl. That's 3 of the 7 passing attacks that they played this year. The Chiefs lost Rashee Rice in the game early, so that's now 4 of their 7. I think Jameis is going to be able to move the ball through the air, and obviously Tillman and Njoku have been the 2 that have really benefited. I know Elijah Moore to a certain extent as well, but Tillman and Njoku are getting a lion's share of the targets right now in the game and the quarter that they played.
So just got to report that Brian Robinson for the Commanders is inactive today.
Oh, motherfucker.
Yeah, it looks like we're not going to rely
Well,
on
that answered a couple of those
Jorge
questions, didn't
for
it?
his finger on the pulse in Washington.
Thank you,
That's-
Jorge, for that, because now I got to
Wow.
change the lineup. 2 of them,
Thanks,
actually.
Jorge.
No,
Everybody
I mean,
was
legit,
listening.
thank you. Because that would have been bad.
Well, there you guys have it. If anything, so then going back to that matchup, I mean, I think Eckler had been a little banged up as well, but he's in line for a really strong start. I would say that by Captain Obvious here, of course, but is what it is. But so then going back to Jason's question from earlier, his new question now is Alexander Madison, Ramondre Stevenson, or do you throw Austin Eckler over those 2? And I say yes. I would start Eckler over both Madison and Stevenson. Any disagreement there?
Yes. I would
Yes,
start
you
Eckler.
disagree?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I agree with you.
I think Eckler. I think Eckler's the play. Stevenson would be my backup behind Eckler, but I'd play Eckler.
Jorge, would you
Agreed.
pick up McNichols if you
I
need
would
a back for just somebody to start, like on buys and injuries, etc.?
I would pick up McNichols. I don't think Eckler is at the point now where he'd be an every down back. And we saw McNichols get involved even when Brian Robinson was the starting running back during the Arizona game. And so, yeah, I would definitely insert McNichols if you had to have a desperation situation.
Which I
I
do
don't-
now.
Yes. Anybody in my leagues, congratulations. You beat me to the punch there because I can't do it. I can barely multitask answering questions and trying to read the chat and the and the breakdown, let alone make any moves. So I'll concede the I don't actually if me missing out on Jeremy McNichols is the worst thing that happens this morning, I'm okay. I'm fine. Let's go to the Chargers at Cleveland real quick, knock out some of this. The Chargers are 1 point road favorites against Cleveland, 42.5 point total. It's DJ Chark returns to practice, could be back in line. I don't know what the implications that are this week, if any, maybe going forward. He could eat into workload of some of the competing pass catchers. Christian Fulton is out on the Cleveland side. Jordan Hicks is out. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is on the IR. Yes, Keith, they all do have difficult names.
told
That's why we
you.
limit it
It's
to
ridiculous.
JOK. I can say
Almighty.
JOK easier than I can say Njoku. Not much easier, but a little bit easier. And Njoku, on the other hand, was he didn't practice and got a limited practice in. I think he's going to play, but there was, Njoku's going to be the only obvious play for me in this entire this matchup. He's like the only go to. Hey, Dave. Morning.
What's going on, fellas?
Not too much, buddy.
I was watching the show from a few weeks ago, right? And one thing I noticed, right, and I want to be full disclosure, I don't have a Hitler mustache, right? It's just that I get gray hair here, and the only hair I have is in the middle. Just so everyone knows,
People
all right?
saying you have
I
a
was looking
Hitler
and going, "Holy
mustache
crap,
because
looks
I
like I
will
got a
talk
Hitler
to
mustache."
them and say that's not very nice.
Look at that! Look, I can see it now. Can you see it? It's because I only get
Well,
hair.
actually, I
growth
can. I
with, like,
can.
my
I can't
color
see it
grows
now
there.
that you
So
pointed it out.
everything else is
Mhm.
gray. So just so everyone knows, I'm not trying to.
And then we got
Greatest
replicate
introduction ever.
the 1940s leader.
Hi, Jerry. Look what you just walked
So,
into.
someone saw the other day. They're like, "Dave, what?"
I think it looks
It's a
like
bold look.
Anyway,
There is what
continue.
they're thinking.
hey, Charlie Chaplin was a great.
Let's go with
actor.
Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. See, done.
I'm gonna start dyeing my beard.
Yes, exactly. I wish I had a great segue from
Yeah,
Charlie
that-
Chaplin to Jameis Winston, but unfortunately, I don't.
No Hitler segue. Okay.
I don't have a Hitler segue.
Another injury update. Amari
Yeah.
Cooper is inactive.
Amari Cooper is inactive too.
That's
Nice.
correct.
There we go.
Oh, what?
So we'll keep.
Okay.
Yep, we're going to keep these coming. Khalil Shakir, of course, is significant upgrade. More significant seems like a strong.
Well,
I
I'm
already
going to
like.
jump on and I'm going to jump on and just be a consumer. DeAndre Hopkins or Austin Eckler, guys?
Oh, I would probably
After
say
that news.
Austin Eckler.
Yeah. I
gotta
going
be, right?
forward. Yeah, I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough volume yet for Hopkins. I do believe that if you saw him in his usage in the game, it was first, third, and distance of the game. They looked directly Hopkins' way. And the next big third down, or one of a few third downs later, they went his direction again. But it was not a lot of manufactured, or it was a lot of manufactured touches. And the playbook will expand. He'll get more involved, but it will be, I think next week will probably be where he's fully integrated into that offense. But
You know where I fall into the trap? It's that Monday night, something about that Monday night matchup. You feel like I just want to save some firepower, some ammunition for Monday, you know?
I always
So it
want to
tricks
do
you.
that.
It tricks you.
It does. We Jameis, bam, we know there's gunslinger, as Keith and I said earlier. We love that mentality. The Chargers, as Keith has alluded to, maybe a little overrated in that pass D. So there's going to be some pass catchers for the Browns that could benefit. Cedric Tillman's one, Elijah Moore's another. What are we doing with good old Nick Chubb, though? JT, is Chubb, as you've seen, slow progression? Is this the week where he gets fully unleashed and we can trust it more so than just the touchdown upside?
I'm not playing Chubb unless I have to again. He's one of those guys, like, until I see it, he's fully back and they're giving. And it's like now that Jameis is in there, they're like, oh, let's try to open things up a little bit and throw a little bit more. So I'm not in on Chubb this week for me, unless he's like, you got to play him, unless you just don't have options. If I had better options, I'm probably waiting on him again, because I think again, it's possible a touchdown upside is about what you're looking for.
Yeah. On the Charger side, we've said, Ladd in this situation is definitely a bang play. J.K. Dobbins is, here's the thing is Cleveland's recently been decently stingy against the run. J.K. Dobbins, coincidentally, hasn't looked as good going back. We've seen a couple Dobbins questions in the chat. Is anybody absolutely, banging the drum for J.K. Dobbins this week?
I kind of am. Like, you look at the two linebackers for Cleveland, both Jordan Hicks and JOK, they're out, so now you're relying on, was it Diabate? Yeah, so I think that kind of lends itself to kind of giving Dobbins more of an upside had Hicks and JOK been starting.
Fair enough. That's good. Hey, I don't have a problem. I mean, give me the lead back, and it's again, week 9, bye weeks, injuries. You could do much, much worse. The question I had led in with is DJ Chark being back. Is anybody stashing DJ Chark with expectations of anything more so than just a able body on the field? Dave, you're a Chargers guy. You live there.
Too many mouths. There's too many. I'm also an avid Justin Herbert fan base supporter. I think I'm the only one right now. Maybe there's two. Me and his mum.
No, you've missed. You haven't been listening to me.
But look,
talk about.
Look, I'm a fan of that offense. The trouble is that there's really no clear number one, and I mean, Chark is walking into what being the third best option on that team. I don't know. I'm just not buying it. You're pretty much relying on a big play from DJ Chark, which, let's be honest, he hasn't been hot since 2019. That was really the last time he was, a real big play guy. So
I
too risky, way too risky.
Yeah, I don't like Johnston either this week. I know he's back. Like, to me, it's Palmer and Ladd because, again, Browns run man at a very high rate. Johnston's been very good versus zone, not so good versus man. Both Palmer, he's been good versus man, and then Ladd again, 9th in fantasy points per target. It's like 3rd or 4th in target rate. Like, I mean, it's a he's somebody that is really feasted on man defense. He's a man eater, if you will. Justin Herbert has also been better this season versus the man. And I just really do like they've thrown it over 30 times per game since the bye. This was a team that was throwing it like 23 or 24 times before that. So I think they've kind of changed a little bit of their philosophy. Herbert's got healthy in their offensive line as well.
Gotcha.
This is one thing to consider, though. This is the time of year where you got to start considering weather. Warm weather teams going to cold weather. Teams from LA going to Cleveland, Ohio. You know, they're not exactly, they don't acclimatize as much, if you will. So weather is going to start to be a factor. I think this is probably the first week. I mean, what is it, in the 50s in Cleveland, Ohio right now? They're going from, it's got to be, 75 here in California to, 50-something. It's the one thing I just noticed is that those teams don't, they're not airing the ball out like they do when they're in the dome in LA.
I think we have to start talking like 20 degrees teams before we start worrying about weather. I think 50 degrees is still you're still in a safe zone right there.
It's currently 59 degrees in Los Angeles and sunny, and it is. Let's see. I don't currently have Cleveland saved to my phone for the weather. So
how dare you?
I know.
It's going to be 63 degrees.
So
is what they're saying in Cleveland. So.
It's 58 in Pittsburgh right now, currently, though. Sunny. Looks like rain on Wednesday, though, for you Pittsburghers. Get your chores outside done by Wednesday. And that has been your weather update brought to you.
But, guys, I've got to run. As always, I love spending time with you guys. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Believe in Justin Herbert and Lad McConkey today. And start Jalen Coker in your DraftKings lineups. Don't be afraid.
There you go.
See you guys soon. Take care, guys.
Later,
Thank you.
Supersize Senpei wants to know.
You got to keep in mind, man, for us Californians, when we get below 75 degrees Celsius, as Fahrenheit, it's it's freezing for us.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. That's
yeah. We're not.
I feel so bad for you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's cold,
freezing hot, freezing
weather
cold.
stuff.
So Bo Nix or Kyler Murray.
I want to ride with. I'm riding with Bo Nix. Look, he is, when it comes to the past 3 weeks in terms of rushing yards, he's the QB1. Fantasy points per game, he is the QB7 with 21.9. Like, give me Bo Nix.
I can't believe I'm going to agree with you. I'll take Nix too. Murray has not been good this year. I mean, if people have watched his tape, it's not been pretty. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm probably taking Nix as well.
Yeah, almost any other matchup for Kyler, and I would take Kyler just because the rushing upside built in with enough of a passing floor. But Chicago doesn't allow that floor. They set it on fire with their corners, and I just don't trust that necessarily. And I am right there with you. It's Bo Nix. So then Dan wants to know, take Bigsby with ETN likely to play, or Javonte Williams in a half-point PPR. We talked earlier about Jacksonville. If they get behind, it's not only ETN you have to worry about, but it's also Dearness Johnson. It's also taking Bigsby's health. But is that enough to overcome Javonte being Javonte potentially, who last week it was Javonte answers across the board, right? No matter what, Carolina, best matchup he could possibly face. He's been feasting, and he pooped in your Cheerios. So
yeah, the Ravens are allowing the league fewest yards and rushing average with 3.3 yards per carry. I'd rather take my chances with the Jacksonville backs here.
Okie doke. And then Jordan Love or Matthew Stafford today. I think we kind of touched. We had one question like this earlier, and Keith and I leaned the Jordan Love side, even with the groin injury. It's just his grasp of that offense is so good right now, and not knowing what Puka's going to do, if he's going to play or not. I'm leading Jordan Love. What about you guys, JT?
I'm starting Stafford. Stafford's just a different player when he has Kupp and he has Puka. Puka is supposed to give it a go. That opens up Robinson. This Rams offense is just such a different beast when those two guys play, and Stafford looks so much better when he has them. I'm pulling the trigger on Stafford today in quite a few spots.
I agree. I'm going with Stafford today.
Well, here's an uglier quarterback question for you. Gardner Minshew, Bryce Young, Mason Rudolph. I'm going to go Bryce Young. You know, I don't love it, but I think New Orleans secondary is so banged up that he has a chance to actually, exploit it just enough. I know that's crazy, but I don't want anything to do with the Tennessee offense and Vegas against Cincinnati. I just feel like I think Cincinnati's going to put Minshew in a blender, and it's going to just be a bad outing. What do you got, Jorge?
I think I'm going to go Rudolph. Against a really good secondary for Detroit last week. 22 for 38, 266 yards. Hyper targeting Calvin Ridley seems to be what he's all about, and going against New England's defense, which is kind of suspect. I think I'd go Rudolph in this situation.
JT?
Oh, this one is close. This one's close, and I hate to say it, I have all these guys in a few leagues. I really want to say Minshew is going to be able to put up some stats against the Bengals, but I'm ultra worried about him getting just the crap beat out of him by Hendrickson and Hubbard and the D line just being all over him all day, and him having a bunch of turnovers. And if you have a high negative points for turnovers or sacks in your league go against your QB, that would really make me nervous about Minshew. I feel like Minshew's got the highest ceiling here, in that he could put up really solid numbers as far as yardage and some scores. But man, if you have any kind of point total where you're getting negatives for turnovers or sacks, I would want to avoid him. I like Bryce Young just because the Saints defense is kind of beat up. But man, I might go Rudolph. I might go Jorge here. Rudolph has been solid, and he knows how to play when it's kind of ugly. I know the wide receiving core is not great for him, but I think they might end up, especially with the issues with Pollard. They might end up leaning on him a lot more than we think this week. In an ugly game, I'm gonna slightly say Rudolph. If you don't get a lot of negative points for fumbles, interceptions, or sacks, I'm going Minshew. I think he has the highest ceiling if you're not getting negative plays. If the negative plays are bad, if you're like a -4 for a pick, -3 or 4 for a fumble, -2 for a sack, then I'm out on Minshew. But if it's low, -1 for a pick and a fumble, then I'm gonna play the high ceiling of Minshew.
Gotcha. Point total wise, Vegas, Cincinnati's the highest at 45. Carolina's next at 43. And then the Tennessee game is down at 38. So if you're chasing points, that's the order of those three, but that doesn't always equate to singular quarterback production. Here's Bedbugs has a question that's leaving him scratching his head. Calvin Ridley or Zay Flowers?
Go ahead.
I would say he's leaning towards Ridley because Zay against Denver, and I agree with that. I think that Zay matched up against, most likely it's going to be Pat Surtain, which is very challenging, of course. After Ridley's last week, if you're choosing Mason Rudolph out of those three quarterbacks, I think you guys are probably going to definitely lean Ridley, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to go Ridley here.
I'm playing Flowers for the upside that he gets a big play, but you Flowers could do some good, but man, there's a pretty high likelihood that he gets shut down in this game. So it's if you're chasing hey man, I just want to make sure I'm getting something out of a guy, probably Ridley, because you'd assume he's gonna see. I would think he would see quite a few more targets than Flowers today, and by quite a few, I'm saying 4 to 5 more targets at least. I think.
So here's a quick rundown of the actives before we jump on this question. Tony Pollard is active. Tyler Boyd is active. Curtis Samuel is active. Inactive today are Will Levis, T. Higgins, Zach Moss, Jermaine Burton, Amari Cooper, Javon Holland, Brian Robinson Jr., then DJ Chark and Deontay Foreman. So the Chark returns, but he's not playing, and then Deontay Foreman being out. So not a ton of revelations from anything that we already knew, but just affirmations. Going to Broken's question. Dave, Tyrone Tracy, who's been electric, or David Montgomery in a. I mean, did he continue his touchdown streak? Didn't he have one going that was?
I don't think he
long?
scored last week.
Yeah, I think he finally it broke because he
It
was
broke?
my anytime TD play of the week like every week to start this year. I was like, put David Montgomery in your anytime TD parlay, do it every time. I think last week was the week that broke it. I don't think he got one.
Well,
Look, I normally say never trust a man with a woman's name, but I got to go with Tracy Jr. here, right? I mean, he's been hot. He's been hot, man. I mean, you know how I feel about Devin Singletary. I'm not a big fan of him. Tracy's just looked explosive, catching passes, north and south. Yeah, I mean, until further notice, sign me up for Tracy Jr.
yeah, I agree with that too. He's pretty much dominated the workload. The concussion doesn't scare me that they're going to give Singletary more work than what was expected going in with or without the concussion scenario from last week. What else you got, Jorge?
We got a lot here, and we'll get to more of these after our next game. But let's go with this one first.
Hey.
From Baxter Loafman.
I'm going to tell you, I think we just answer the questions. I don't think there's a chance in hell
Robert,
in
the rest. Yeah.
18 minutes that we're going to get through 9 more games. So we'll just incorporate the questions. And honestly, I think that's going to help more so than me just bring up speculative questions from the games of who do you trust more, Julius Chestnut with Pollard playing? So let's go with this one. All right, he's starting Tyrone Tracy over Josh Jacobs at RB2. Jacobs with the ankle and against the Lions defense. Do you like that move, or is Babster Loafman cray-cray?
No, I like the move. I like Tyrone. I mean, Tyrone Tracy has been getting the volume. We've seen his broken tackle numbers, just especially against Pittsburgh last week. That was just crazy impressive. Clear the concussion protocol. Washington is very susceptible to the run. So yeah, give me Tyrone Tracy right here.
Gotcha. Perfect. Any disagreement there, fellas?
That's close for me. Jacobs is just because I just think Jacobs is playing so well. I would slightly lean Jacobs, but I can absolutely see where you'd want to take Tracy in that matchup.
How about this, Dave? Would you start Keon Coleman since Cooper is out? Don't know what the options are. Keon Coleman
Over who? I mean, that's.
I know, but let's gauge the temperature level. Is Keon Coleman going to produce as a wide receiver 3 this week for you in your eyes?
Yes. I mean, I would say he's a wide receiver 2. I'm comfortable with him at wide receiver 2, to be honest, right now. I'd play him over like DeAndre Hopkins, for example.
Okay. So
yeah, you look at the past 3 weeks, Keon Coleman's the wide receiver 24 in PPR with a 13.4% point per game average. We talked about it earlier from Colby Conway's article that his yards per outrun has increased the past couple of weeks with Amari Cooper there. No Amari Cooper today. I mean, I think this is the potential for a Keon Coleman breakout game, but definitely at most flex play. At least a flex play.
At least a flex play is a fair statement. Next is it's ugly, but do you go with Elijah Moore, Raheem Mostert, or Jake Ferguson in the flex? You guys answer that. I shall be back in 2 minutes.
You know what's funny about this question right here? The person's name is Footy University, and I keep thinking back to the Kay and Peele skit where they're doing like the crazy names like from the different universities, and it's like Harvard University. University. Anywho, this is ugly, but Elijah Moore, Raheem Mostert, Jake Ferguson. Keith Fleming, who was on earlier, he was mentioning how both defenses for this game, the Chargers and the Browns, are not exactly what we like to call good. So I do like Elijah Moore in this instance versus cover 1, aka man defenses in terms of fantasy points per route run. Elijah Moore does lead the team in that metric. So I think Elijah Moore. JT, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think Moore is probably the play, in that Cleveland will have to throw the ball a bit. Mozart TD upside. So if you're in a league where like it's not PPR and it's more TD heavy league, Mozart's going to have a shot at TD. I just think A-Chain takes most of the carries, so I'm not sure what his upside as far as total carries is going to be. And Ferguson's tough for me unless you're playing in a high tight end premium. If it's a high tight end premium, 175.2, then I'd go Ferguson, but I'm guessing you're not, or you probably wouldn't be asking that question. So I'm probably going to lean Elijah Moore here, especially if it's any kind of PPR.
All right. Dave, let's go to you now for this next question. Khalil Shakir with no Amari Cooper now and starting for the Buffalo Bills, or Cedric Tillman coming off of that pretty crazy performance last week for the Cleveland Browns. Do you believe Tillman can go 2 for 2, or are you counting on the PPR upside for Shakir with no Amari Cooper?
I'm counting on the stability of Shakir. You know what you've got in Shakir. Tillman, that could be a one-off. It could be regular. I don't know. It's too early to tell. You know, it's it was one great performance, fantastic performance, 2 touchdowns. But I'd rather stick with the guy who's going to be either the one or the first, second, or third, passing or catching option, I should say, in Buffalo. So give me Shakira.
We got Will Power in the chat, who's been in the chat, I want to say, for like a majority of our shows the past few weeks, and really glad he's here because he always helps us with the actives and inactives here. We got Pollard active for Tennessee, Christian Ellis active for the New England Patriots, and inactive for the New England Patriots is Kyle Duggar at defensive back. So that is good information. Thank you, Mr. Powers. Let's see here.
So I just saw the news come through about the Zeke not going with the team. I mean, what do you make of that? Are we holding on to Zeke that he finds a new home?
I don't think.
There were whispers that this was maybe like disciplinary action, not like they're getting rid of him or cutting him, but like there was some kind of issues within the team, coaching, they were upset with him, kind of thing. So I'm not sure yet there. I mean, obviously, if you got Zeke and you're holding Zeke, it's like you're just in a deep league where like any starting running back or backup you have to hold. If you're not in a super deep league, then I think you're out. Go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah, so you had this question that we hadn't got to earlier, but then he decided to say, are you going to answer my question or not? Quit twiddling your hairs. You know what? Get the fuck out of our chat. How about that? Yeah, so.
Dang. What was his question? Now I want to know.
Well, it doesn't matter now. Let's keep going here.
Damn, I want to give the wrong answer.
Keybro says,
it was intense. I don't think I've ever seen anything so derogatory.
Hey, you don't want to mess with a new dad who's sleep deprived. Come on, guys.
Exactly.
That's not a wise decision.
Leggett or Calvin Ridley, PPR scared. Ridley will get locked up by Christian Gonzalez.
Don't be scared of the Patriots. No one should be scared of the Patriots. Even the boogeyman isn't scared of the Patriots. Don't worry. Gonzalez has been okay, but you're playing Calvin Ridley, man. I mean, 15 targets last week, right? What, 140 something odd yards?
Mm-hmm.
At least 1 touchdown. Was it 2? Come on, man. You're playing Calvin Ridley. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes as the overall 1 for the week.
Whoa. I would be very shocked if that happened, just so you know.
We got a question here from Poison_ earlier. Thanks for being patient. Ramondre Stevenson or Darnell Mooney in PPR?
God.
Yeah, I think I'll go Mooney in this situation. I think Dallas' secondary is just so beat up that Kirk Cousins should have a field day passing the ball around to his receivers versus Ramondre. That's a tough one, but I'll go Mooney for the passing upside.
See, I always like to say, what are you looking for, right? Like, did you come here just for apps and a couple of cocktails, or are you looking for a main course and dessert, right? If you're looking for a baseline 10 points, go with Ramondre. You know he's going to get 15 touches. He'll probably fall in the end zone, maybe get you 60, 70, 80 yards, right? If you're looking for big play upside or potentially zero, the high risk, high reward, go Mooney.
We got a question here from Supersize Senpai. Another question here. Should I start Dalton Kincaid or TJ Hawkinson? I know Dalton is the safe pick, but I can't get that massive upside of TJ out of my head. JT, thoughts?
I'm going Kincaid here. TJ first game back, hasn't really played much with Darnold. I think TJ is going to be a nice place down the stretch and in the playoffs here. But if you go back and look at the stats, I know it didn't happen in the first game of the year, but Josh Allen has absolutely lit up the Dolphins for big yards over the last 7 or 8 games before this last game where Cook went off. So I want Kincaid. I think Kincaid has a shot at having a big game, especially with no Cooper in there. I think you're going to see a decent amount of targets for Kincaid. I like his touchdown upside as well.
Got G-Rod in the chat here. Thanks for all you do, guys. Thank you. Thank you for appreciating it. Thank you all for tuning in today. Love those comments.
You're banned. Get the fuck out of here. No. We don't like jerks. We don't like ass kissers. Beat it, bum. I'm just kidding.
You got to be right in the middle. You got to hit that sweet spot.
Keep it simple
for us to like you.
Exactly.
Which I'm obviously totally joking. Hopefully you do know, because I love that. I need positive reaffirmation. I always do. I'm like we're men. We need that more than anything. We're a bunch of sissies and need support and everything else.
Yeah, when we do the bare minimum of chores around the house, we need to be acknowledged that we did the bare minimum and helped out.
Exactly. I point out when I take out the bathroom trash can, you would think I built the bathroom. I was like,
yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
I'm like, hey, I threw that trash can out of all your all your trash and makeup crap that you had in there, none of which was mine, of course. And then I ruined the chore.
Dude, in 2019, I changed the shower head, and I still remind Anna till this day.
Well,
that was a big deal. I pretty much redid the bathroom there, right?
I changed the shower head 2 days ago myself. What do you think of that?
You need a break. Okay? Take a week off.
I was off this weekend.
Nice. I always get that. Well, you would have gotten complimented had you not said anything, but since you had to go and toot your own horn there you go. But anyhow, that's not what you all want to hear. CMB challengers. I need a running back and a flex PPR. Here are my options: Bates, Brown, Hubbard, Jacobs, or Downs. Downs definitely your flex, I believe. Anybody disagree?
Yep. I think he's the flex. It's between the running backs. I'm loving Chase Brown this week personally. I just think that I think there's gonna be a lot of points in that game. No Moss. They're gonna have him on the field. He has big play upside receiving and rushing. My money, I like Hubbard and Jacobs, so I'm playing those guys everywhere. So I'm not telling you not to. But if in this scenario, I want Brown as my RB and I want Downs as my flex.
Got Kevin Tompkins here in the chat, which, by the way, folks,
Kev.
If you head over to fantasyandframes.com every Tuesday, Kevin puts together a fantastic waiver wire article for you. But he's got a Kings Classic lineup question, which, if you don't know, the Kings Classic is one of these leagues that you have basically the best of the best fantasy experts in all the space go to Canton, Ohio each and every year and compete in 14-team leagues. And it is no joke. So do not fault him one bit for asking this question here. Last spot in Kings Classic lineup, full PPR, pick 2. Miles Sanders, Keyshawn Butte, or Troy Franklin. I like Keyshawn. I got to phrase this really carefully. I like Keyshawn really well, given his involvement in the passing game here. And I think I'm going to go Troy Franklin over Miles Sanders. What do you guys think?
I'm going Franklin for sure. I think Butte probably over Sanders. I'm going to the chance that those guys get some volume. Sanders, unless something happens to Chuba, I just think he doesn't see a ton of work. I don't love the upside of him. I'm going the 2 wideouts because there's a chance that both those guys have an outside shot of leading their team in receiving this week.
Yeah, Keyshawn already last week was the most routes run, the opportunity, which will always be, especially when you're in leagues like that with Kevin and I face. Trust me, when we talked earlier about the Jeremy McNichols, hey, maybe he's worth a pickup. He's unfortunately been on my roster for about 4 weeks in the Kings Classic. It ain't good. I can tell you. I wish I had an option that's nice to be able to choose to. So that's I agree with you guys.
I'm going for the upside, and yeah, I'm more of a booty man myself. So give me Kayshawn, man. I think he's proved that he can. Yeah, I mean, he went for what, $120 one game and 2 touchdowns, I think, from Drake May. Drake May's playing. He looks his way. You know, I love the red zone appeal of the booty man.
Nice. We got a question from Babster. Yes. I think this is the name that I think I've liked the most against everybody else this morning because it does not roll off the tongue. It reminds me of Napster, and it reminds me of bread, which these are all things that I like. So anyhow, Babster Loafman. That's wow. You needed to hear that, folks. Are we going Coker over Odunze this week? Let's go back to Dave.
I can't trust anyone in Chicago right now. I'm going Cooker right now, to be honest. So it's not that Odunze isn't talented. He absolutely is. But that Chicago offense is just not looking – it's just too hot and cold. Too hot and cold for my liking.
Yeah, Shocker, the one with the Hitler stash going for the Coker head.
I was about to make an inappropriate joke, but keep it PG.
Steven's in the chat. Go ahead.
Yep.
Go ahead.
No. He's looking for advice on whether he should replace Josh Jacobs in his lineup with Raheem Mostert, Lad McConkey, or Tank Bigsby. Full point PPR. Me personally, I would go Jacobs over those, but I'm intrigued to hear if anyone leans. Jorge, do you lean a different direction?
I lean McConkey just because going against Cleveland, which runs the highest rate of cover one man, aka man defense. McConkey is the wide receiver 3 at fantasy points per route run. He should be hyper targeted today. And again, with it being a full PPR, look for McConkey to have another, exciting performance like he had last week.
I'm leaning McConkey as well for all the reasons that Jorge just said. I just think he's starting to get that connection. The Chargers are starting to throw the ball more. He's clearly their number one. Mm-hmm. I'm playing McConkey.
Is ETN out? Is ETN out today?
I do not believe so.
They say it's so far it sounds like he's gonna play, but it's not like it didn't seem like they were like, oh yeah, he's definitely playing and gonna start and get a ton of workload. It was like, I think he's gonna play this week. So I'm nervous about how much he actually gets, especially if they get down early against the Eagles. I'm worrying how much they push him if they get down early.
Yeah, probably McConkey then.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with McConkey. I know that if I'm Green Bay, I'm being protective of Jordan Love with a groin injury, and I'm probably going to feed Jacobs a lot more. But a healthy fed Josh Jacobs, does that equal what the median of Lad McConkey can be? And you guys may be onto something with McConkey there over Jacobs. So tough wide receiver 2 question though: Jalen Tolbert, Christian Watson, Rome Odunze. So Odunze is probably out because he's probably the actual wide receiver 3 on their team. So I doubt he should be the wide receiver 2 on your team this week. But Jalen Tolbert trending in the right direction as far as being the number 2 option in Dallas. Christian Watson, whack-a-mole of which wide receiver is going to have the best week. JT, start with you.
Man, that one's close for me. I'm probably going Tolbert just because I think he's going to see some volume. I think they're going to have to throw. I mean, the Cowboys are going to have to throw. So Watson's the more talented player. He's the bigger upside if you can get a deep bomb to him. But again, like you said, Green Bay, it's tough to say week to week who's going to be the top wide out there. I'm probably going Tolbert, though. I think Watson has the biggest upside. If you get big play points from your wide receivers for like 40-yard or 50-yard catches and touchdowns, and you get like big time bonuses, I would lean Watson trying to go for the big score. If not, I'm going Tolbert.
All right. Let's see here. Got Will back in the chat. So just that Mitchell this week. Keaton is a stash. Has been mine too for Scott Fishwell, actually. I could pivot away from Chestnut to Roshan or Dearness Johnson. I think Pollard plays limited snaps. I agree with all of that. But
yeah, so then you lean Chestnut, I'm guessing, right?
I do, yes. Let's see here. Says thanks, I appreciate it. We got Jacob. Two more questions, and then we'll be wrapping it up today, folks. Unless you get your questions in really quickly. Jacob asks Chubb, Odunze, or Tillman. I go Tillman. Anybody agree? Okay. Then we got here from Poison _ Kyle Larson or Ray Blaney.
Ryan Blaney. Those are NASCAR racers. I don't know who's better. I just know the name. I don't actually know.
Is it full PPR or half PPR?
It's
full crash.
I used to be in a NASCAR league like 10, 15 years ago, a NASCAR fantasy league. I tell you, I haven't watched since I stopped.
Damn, I didn't know that
league. I have no idea. I have no idea.
I will say I played in one that you had to start a different racer each week, and I had no clue, but I just randomly picked. It was the most fun to not pay it to watch like the last 2 or 3 laps, and you did. You said PPR, so like point per rec, right? And you're going to say,
is that really a metric?
It can be. Do you think rec is spelled with an R? If so, you may watch NASCAR. I'm just kidding. That was you might be a redneck joke for.
You got Jeff Fox.
Welcome.
I know. Gotcha. Jay Smells. That's awesome. Start 2. Puka, Pollard, Tracy, Olave. I'm assuming this is a PPR. So I would go Puka and Tracy.
Same.
Puka, Tracy.
I can't not start Olave. There's
Really?
no way I'm leaving Olave out of my lineup. No way. He's the only. It's him
option.
And Alvin Kamara. And I mean, maybe Taysom Hill, but with Derek Carr back, 30 to 35% target share, how is that staying out of a lineup? Man, I
was
can't.
it Mason Tipton? Is that his name? I don't even know.
He's out. He's on the IR.
Oh wow.
Bub Means or not the IR.
Yeah.
I mean, Bub Means is on the IR. Tipton was banged up. Who else? There was Keaton. Kendre Miller's out. Not that affects the receiver. I don't know. I'm just me personally. I'm keeping Olave in. And I'm going Olave and I don't know how you take Puka out, but
right. I got you. Got Willpower. Thanks, guys. Great show once again. Always appreciate the insight from you all, and we appreciate everybody who's.
You got everyone on tilt now, Jorge. Everyone's freaking out.
I know everybody's like,
Don't
really great show.
Never answer our questions again.
Look, we apologize if we missed your question. Obviously. We'll try to get to all of them next week, and hopefully we helped out all of you and you got great advice. And for those who we do not get your question right away, you know what? Be nice about it. That's all I got to say. Poison says,
or you'll get kicked out.
Yeah.
We look forward to you next week, and I'll have all of my NASCAR notes ready. Don't worry. Yeah, that's it. We're out of here.
See you guys and gals. Man, I hit end stream, but